nilaki-laki nitong kapuluan, 10 taon sa gubat nagtahan, nangaakit sumuyo, gumalang, di lalo kaming nakakatalastas ng karapatan mo na tinamong palad. Kaya sa aming puso'y nakalimbag, paggalang sa'yo'y dalisay at wagas. Napapanahon naming itanghal sa kalakhan mong buong paggalang. Palibhasa'y ito ang dakilang araw na sa buong mundo'y dapat ipagdiwang. Mga puso namin sa'yo'y umiibig, alay sa dangal mo na inilalakip. Sa pagbating ito't banal naming nais, kapayapaan sa buhay mo'y nabawi. Dangal naming lahat, tapat mong kampon, ang manatili ka sa mahal mong tungkol. Tangi sa ligayang ikaw ang may ampon. Dito sa Heraldo de la Revolution, napapanahon naming itanghal sa kalakhan mong buong paggalang.
Ay, naririnig daw kayo lahat. Ha? Naririnig daw. Malakas pala. Malakas. Sarado na lang. Anda na ako.
Sa online.
Lahat po, naka-live na 9 o'clock. Pero 9:30,
okay.
Tinan niyo po yung program.
Okay. Opo. Pasensya na po. Akala ko po ay offline tayo.
Offline, diretso po tayo para nakikita
Diretso
ng mga tao habang pumapasok yung mga tao.
Okay. Jobs, pasabihan si Chair, 9:30 pa pala. 9:30 pa pala yung program. Oo.
Sir Ian, standby kayo ha?
Opo.
So,
sir,
9 o'clock, tayong dalawa lang mag-uusap.
Okay. Sige sir, ano lang sir, 2 minutes lang. Hanapin ko lang tong PowerPoint ng LHCN.
Okay, sige. Ako naman papasok ka tatawagin kita mga 9:15, 9:20.
Mandirigmang Pilipino, dakilang lahi ko, bayaning Pilipino sa makabagong panahon.
So, magandang umaga po sa ating mga kababayan mula sa Luzon, sa Visayas at sa Mindanao. Tayo po ay mayroong webinar ngayong araw na ito, no? At marami tayong mga kasama sa Zoom, no? At bukod dito, tayo po ay live stream din sa FB page ng NHCP, NQC, at sa ating sa Cavite Studies Center at sa LHCN. So actually po, anyway, ako po si Dr. Emmanuel Alairo at ako po ay isang guro ng kasaysayan dito sa Salle University, Dasmariñas. Isa po akong Assistant Vice Chancellor for Research at kamakailan lamang po ay nahirang bilang Commissioner ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. At ako po ang magiging moderator ninyo na ito. So siguro, ang simula po ng ating formal na pagbubukas ay 9:30 pa. Pero dapat magkaroon na tayo ng kaunting information tungkol sa ating webinar. So ano nga ba po itong nawawala po ang ating signal. Part po ng limitation ng technology. Anyway, tuloy po tayo, no? So ang webinar po nito is spearheaded by the Cavite Studies Center of Salle University, Dasmariñas. Pero in partnership po, kasama po natin ang ating host, ang National Historical Commission of the Philippines at ang Local Historical Communities Network. At kung matatandaan ninyo, bago mag-pandemic, ang Cavite Studies Center po ay karaniwang nagsasagawa ng mga publications, no? Naglo-launch ng mga libro, nagre-research, meron kaming library dito sa office. Nasa Cavite Studies Center po ako ngayon. At nag-o-organize ng mga events. At yan po ay ginagawa rin ng iba't ibang study center at ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Kaya lamang, itong dumating na nga ang ating pandemic, ang COVID-19, alam na po natin na ang IATF ay sinasabi na bawal ang face-to-face. Kaya naghanap tayo ng mga paraan para ma-reach out ang ating komunidad. At ito po ang ating naisip, ang webinar. No? At ang webinar po na ito ay tatakbo po ng isang taon, no? Buwan-buwan. Ang ating pong theme ay Sustaining the Discourse on Philippine History and Culture During the Pandemic. No? Sapagkat napakahirap po, no, ng communication sa panahon na ito. Kaya tamang-tama na meron po tayong webinar para masustinahan ang ating mga diskusyon tungkol sa kasaysayan. Actually po, itong araw na itong ating webinar, ito po ay pangalawa na sa serye. Kasi yung una naganap nung June 11, no, in commemoration of the Philippine Independence Day. Ngayon naman, actually ang July po at ang August pinagsama natin para pagkilala sa ating kasaysayan. No? Kaya ang ating focus ay Philippine History, Historiography, Part 1 ngayong July. At ang susunod ay Historiography, Part 2. Kaya yan po, antabayanan po natin, buwan-buwan po ang ating webinar. No? So, year-long po ito at bakit po nagaganap po? Dahil sa una, sa ating mga major sponsors, ang Cavite Studies Center ng Salle University, Dasmariñas, siyempre ang National Historical Commission of the Philippines, ang National Quincentennial Celebration Committee, ang Local Historical Communities Network. At bukod sa mga ahensya po na ito, meron din po tayong mga partners katulad ng National Commission for Culture and the Arts, ang Bahay Saliksikan sa Bansa o ang Kabansa, ang Philippine Historical Association, ang Center for Tarlaqueño Studies, ang Palawan Study Center, ang Bacoor Historical Society at ang Cavite Historical Society. So yan po ay nagsama-sama ang mga samahan, ang mga ahensya, departamento, association para magkaroon ng katuparan itong monthly webinar po natin. At ginagawaan po natin to in solidarity with the 2021 Quincentennial Commemoration of the Philippines with the theme victory, and humanity. So yan po ang sinasagawa nating mga programa. So may 3 oras po tayo magkakasama-sama ngayon at mamaya makakasama natin of course ang chairman ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines, si Dr. Rene Escalante, no? At mamaya rin magbibigay ng mensahe ang Vice Chancellor for Academics and Research ng De La Salle University, Dasmariñas, si Dr. Marco S.A.S. Then from there, magsisimula po ang ating programa ng paglalahad ng mga ating tagapagsalita o mga speakers. Sapagkat ang ating tema po ay may kinalaman ngayon sa historiography, ang webinar na ito ay nakafocus sa quincentennial. So mapapansin niyo sa programa natin, meron tayong inimbitahan na apat na presenters, no? Isa po ay magfo-focus sa sa pagbubuo ng isang lalawigan. Alam niyo po kasi sa Pilipinas, marami po mga nagtatanong paano po ba nabubuo ang isang lalawigan noong panahon ng Espanyol, no? So itong isang speaker natin na mamaya ay papakilala natin ay magbibigay ng isang information o narrative, no? So ano ba ang experience ng Cavite, no? So ito po ay kanyang pagsasaliksik. Ang pangalawa pong speaker natin mamaya itatalakay naman tungkol sa role, no, o bahagi ng Palawan sa Magellan Voyage. Siguro yung kanyang preliminary study, no, na ibabahagi sa atin. Maski na ako hindi ako masyadong familiar doon. So bagong-bago po itong information na ito. At ang pangatlo, tandem ang mag-ama, no, na ating speaker ay may kinalaman naman ang kanilang talakayan tungkol sa iba't ibang mga sources of history, no, other than the Pigafetta narrative. So yan po, punong-puno po ang ating webinar po ngayong araw na ito. At siguro may mga nagtatanong, ano po ba ang ibig sabihin ng LHCN, no? Kasi po ang LHCN ay isang bahagi ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Kaya siguro maaari nating tawagan, no, kausapin ang isa sa mga senior history researcher ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Isa pong kaibigan, batang-bata, nakasama ko to sa kabansa, no, bata pa, pero ngayon nais na rin sa mga kinikilalang historiador ng ating bayan, no. Ito po ay walang iba kundi si Mr. Ian Christopher Alfonso. Ian, nandiyan ka na ba?
Magandang umaga po, Dr. Manny.
Magandang umaga. Ano? Siguro bigyan niyo lang tayo ng ating mga kababayan ng paliwanag, no, sa background ng LHCN. No? Hello, good morning.
Good morning po, Doc.
Opo.
Naghanap lang ng magandang spot. Ayun po, may share po akong PowerPoint. Ano po ito? Briefer lang po. Ano po ang Local Historical Committees Network. Ayan po. Bago po ang lahat, ang konteksto po ng Local Historical Committees Network po ay ito ay bunga ng ilang dekadang pagpupunyagi ng National Historical Institute, yung forerunner po ng NHCP, na mapayaman pa yung diskurso, pananaliksik at paghahanap ng mga datos tungkol sa mga kasaysayan ng mga bayan, probinsya at ng mga cultural communities. Yun po yung local history. Dahil po naniniwala ang mga historiador na hindi kasama sa pagbubuo ng ideal na Philippine history ang mga kasaysayang bayan o kasaysayang lokal, ano po. So ito po yung nagsisimula na noong 1960s at yung kasing mga professional historians po noong mga panahon na to ay nakapokus sa pag-develop ng national history. So dumating sa point na bumaba ang mga professional historians sa mga probinsya at doon nakipag-collaborate, nakipagtulungan sa mga may hilig at interes sa mga bayan at probinsya tungkol sa kanilang mga nasasakupang mga kanilang partikular na pook sa Pilipinas. At ang LHCP po ay since 1960s, 70s, 80s po, nagko-conduct na po ng mga seminars, workshop para mahasa at masanay yung ating mga kaibigan na may hilig at interes sa mga probinsya tungkol sa paano ba yung metodo ng pagsasaliksik, paano ba mag-isip historically at paano magsulat historically. At dineputize din ng NHI noon itong mga nagsibangod o nagsipagsulputan ng mga historical societies na maging kasama ng NHI sa mga probinsya noon sa pagbabantay ng mga nagdidelikado ng mga historic sites at kabi-kabilang mga pagkapalit ng mga pangalan ng mga kalye. So kumbaga naging kapartner ng NHI noon itong mga samahan sa mga probinsya para maibaba yung mandato ng ahensya sa lokal. At noong 2009, pinormalize na po ng Estado yung pagkilala niya sa kasaysayang lokal sa pamamagitan po ng paglalagay sa bagong charter ng NHI para maging NHCP. Ito po yung Republic Act 10086 o yung Strengthening the People's Nationalism Act of 2009. Under Section 21 po, nakalagay na, teka lang po, nawala. Teka lang po, nawala lang yung PowerPoint. Ayan. Nakikita niyo po ba yung PowerPoint?
Opo,
nakikita po ba? Nakikita po, opo, ayan. So, under the new charter of NHCP, Section 21 po, nakasaad po doon na itatatag ang Local Historical Committees Network. Ito po ay kasalukuyang nasa ilalim ng tanggapan ng tagapangulo ng komisyon at isa pong sekretariat ang binuo na ang tungkulin niya ay makipag-ugnayan sa iba't ibang mga samahan pangkasaysayan sa mga bayan at probinsya, mga universidad na may mga trust o proyekto o programa patungkol sa pananaliksik ng kasaysayang lokal at kultura para makabuo tayo ng mga ano ba yung mga koleksyon, ano ba yung mga sources na pwedeng magamit na makikita sa mga probinsya. Hindi po kasi, ang akala po kasi ng marami, dahil po kami ay National Historical Commission, nasa amin na po lahat ng kagamitan tungkol sa pag-aaral sa kasaysayan. Ano po? Hindi po totoo yun. So, kaya kailangan po natin talaga riyan ang tulong ng mga kasama nating historiador sa iba't ibang probinsya at mga may hilig at interes. So, yan po yung Section 21 under 10086. Tinatatag ang Local Historical Committees Network. Actually, ano na po ito po ay updated na. Kulang-kulang 50 plus na po ang mga miyembro ng Local Historical Committees Network. Ito po yung composition po para makita niyo po ano ba yung mga pwedeng sumali. Sino ba yung mga pwedeng sumali rito sa LHCN? Opo. Nariyan po, meron po tayong, ang pinakamarami pong miyembro ay mga nanggaling sa mga history-related na NGOs. Susunod po dyan ay yung mga, of course, ang mga universidad na may mga unit patungkol sa pananaliksik historical. Mapapansin natin, like yung sa Cebuano Study Center ng University of San Carlos. Ito nga po, Cavite Study Center ng De La Salle Dasma. Holy Angel University, Center for Kapampangan Studies, marami po yan. And then tumatanggap din na po tayo ngayon ng mga student organization na yung mga sabihin natin samahang pangkasaysayan na mga mag-aaral sa ganitong universidad dahil gusto po ng kasalukuyang chairman ng NHCP, Dr. Rene Escalante, na maisama na po sa maagang stage, ma-involve na ang mga history majors at mga araling palipunan students para ma-immerse na po sila sa ginagawa natin ito para sa local history. Gaya po na nabanggit ko, ang mga pwede pong sumali sa LHCN ay yung mga local historical bodies na ang function nila ay mangolekta, magdokumento, magpopularize, proteksyonan yung mga sources na makikita sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas. At gayon din po yung mga nagre-record ng oral history like yung mga nagdo-document ng mga veterano natin sa mga iba't ibang probinsya. Bakit po kailangan at ano po ang mapapala natin kung tayo po ay maging affiliate ng LHCN? So meron entitled po ang lahat sa discount sa NHCP publications. Po pwede pong ang mga member affiliate po ay pwedeng magamit ang mga facilities ng NHCP, itong central office ng NHCP sa Luneta, yung aming po mga museums. Meron po kami 27 museums across the country. Kung meron po kayong pa-seminar na malapit lang naman po sa mga museo namin, pwede po tayo makipag-ugnayan para po magamit ng libre ang pasilidad natin. At wala pong registration fee sa mga workshop at conferences na ini-spearhead ng NHCP tulad po nitong webinar. At meron po ring at binibigyan, at dahil po sila ay mga affiliate ng NHCP, ang perks po nila ay automatic, iniimbitahan po namin sila sa mga ini-sponsor namin conferences at marami po yan. And then kapag po may kailangan kayong budget o kayo po ay nag-apply ng competitive grant sa NCCA, makakatulong din po ang NHCP na mag-abot ng, sabihin natin, certification na ito po ay itong samahan na to ay may good standing at mayroong track record pagdating sa kanilang ina-applyan na grant sa NCCA. Of course, magkakaroon din po kayo ng kopya ng annual report ng NHCP. Ito po ang mga requirements. Ayan po, kailangan lang niyo po sumulat, letter of intent sa chairman ng NHCP. Mag-provide din po kayong organizational profile. Sa mga private entities po, SEC registration po ang kailangan po natin. Sa mga LGU-based na mga institutions, tulad po ng mga Provincial Historical Committee, di ba? Mayroong mga ganyan. So LGU resolution po, creating that unit sa LGU, and then kung ito naman po ay school-based or university-based, kailangan lang po namin ng certification from the administrator, be it a dean or a director of a particular unit sa school po ninyo o the president, ano po. And then the constitution and bylaws, ano po. So ito po yung mga affiliate duties, yan, umattend po ng LHCN assemblies, maging aktibo po tayo na collaborator ng LHCP sa pag-i-implement ng tinatawag nating LHCN National Action Plan. And then ini-encourage din natin ang mga miyembro na manguna sa pagpreserba ng ating mga lokal na pamana at lokal na kasaysayan sa ating mga bayan-bayan, ano po. And then kung maaari po ay siyempre bilang tayo yung nangungunang may hilig at interes sa kasaysayan, sana sa mga komemorasyon, mga selebrasyon, makipag-participate tayo. Yun nga lang, dahil po COVID, ito po yung hamper sa atin na makisama tuwing June 12, April 9, sa mga holidays. And then, hanggat maaari po, regularly ma-update ang NHCP sa mga aktibidades at yung pagbabago sa samahan, organizational profile, So, ayun po, sana po regular din pong ma-check yung website namin, yung aming Facebook para sa mga announcements. And then kung maaari po ay maipakalat pa itong katulad nitong webinar po, maipakalat pa po natin sa iba pang mga may hilig at interes. Dahil ito po ay libre lang at ito po ay para sa bayan. And then of course, may code of ethics po ang LHCN members, So anyway po, lang po yan. Ayan po. Bilang panghuli, ang vision po ng LHCN ay magkaroon ng mga komunidad sa Pilipinas na may malalim at maigting na maigting na identidad lokal at mula sa pagiging maalam sa pagkakakilanlan ng lokalidad nila, doon nagmumula yung pride na maging Pilipino. At ito sa pamamagitan ng kasaysayang lokal, Ang mission naman po ng LHCN ay i-monitor, makipag-ugnayan, suportahan ng mga local historical bodies na engage sa pangongolekta, pagdokumento, pagpapakilala, pagpreserba, pagkonserba sa mga iba't ibang historical materials na makikita sa iba't ibang bahagi ng bansa. At gayon din po, ma-popularize din po yung pagre-record natin ng oral history, lalo pa sa mga matatanda natin, mga nakakatanda natin na buhay pa, So, Baler agenda, ayan po. medyo ito po ay detalyado po ito. Pwede po nyo ma-access ito. Pwede nyo po ito ma-access sa Facebook page, Dr. Manny. Naka-upload po sa Facebook page ng LHCN para makita nila yung detalye. Ano po. So, yun lamang po, Doc Manny. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat. Iyan, sa isang komprehensibong pagpapaliwanag tungkol sa LHCN. Kami dito sa Cavite Studies Center ay nakaka-relate yan kasi yan ay ginagawa namin. No? Yung sabi mo nga, yung local identity, no? Binubuo natin. Kasi meron ng isang historian na nagsabi na ang ating identity ay still a mythical body politic. No? So, kinakailangan i-substantiate siya ng local level. At ang mga pagbubuo ng mga local histories, no, ay malaking bagay sa pagbubuo ng ating national history. At actually nga po, naka-attend na ako sa mga iba't ibang mga pagpupulong, no, ng Local Historical Communities Network at talagang napakalaking tulong, no, ng National Historical Commission para pagsama-samahan itong mga historical organizations, mga study centers, no, tungo sa iisang agenda, no, para sa ating bayan. Malaki po ang pasalamat natin sa chair, no, si Dr. Rene Escalante sa bagay nito na malaki ang pagtulong at pagpapahalaga niya sa ating mga lokal na samahan at lokal na organisasyon. So we still have 7 minutes bago po tayo magsimula ng programa. But meron po mga nagtatanong dito, no, nababasa ko na meron daw po bang certificate o webinar. Actually po, meron po tayong mga registration sa Zoom. So ito pong sa Zoom, meron po tayong mga yung nag-register, meron pong registration form na isasoli sa atin at isang evaluation form tungkol sa ating activity. So pag nagawa niyo po yung dalawa ngayon, fill out yung registration form at yung evaluation form. I think it's clickable naman. Then padadala po namin ang e-certificate sa inyong mga email addresses. Pero yung po hindi naka-join sa Zoom, kitang-kita naman po natin at tayo po ay available sa nakikita po tayo sa Facebook ngayong araw na ito, no? So isa pa rin sigurong tanong, no, paano ba yung mechanics natin, no? So ang po natin, ang ating pong may mga nagtatanong paano daw po sila mag-i-interact sa open forum. Meron po tayong chat room, no, na pwede yung mag-encode at ang ating pong secretariat ay kukunin ang inyong mga katanungan o mga komento at yan po ay ipapakita sa atin para mabasa dito sa ating screen, no? So ayun po, kaya malaking bagay po yung ating isinasagawang program na ito kasi ito po ay buwan-buwan at ang expectation po natin ang iba't ibang miyembro, no, ng Local Historical Communities Network ay maging bahagi, no, ng ating isinasagawang monthly webinar. Sa pamamagitan nito makikita natin yung mga updates, no, lalo na yung mga scholarly works, no, sa mga bayan-bayan. In fact po, siguro mababanggit ni Chair mamaya yung tungkol sa national, yung bicentennial celebration, no? Paano nagpa-participate yung iba't ibang bayan, no? Actually, dun sa aming mga board meeting na pag-uusapan na yan. Siguro mamaya i-detalye ni Chairman yan. So, we still have 5 minutes bago mag 9:30 at simulan po ang opening ng mga program. So muli po, nice kong banggitin na ito pong programa na ito ay collaboration ng iba't ibang institution. No? Of course, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, ang Local History Communities Network, ang Cavite Studies Center ng Salle University, Dasmariñas, at in collaboration with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, Kapisanan ng mga bahay saliksikan sa bansa, Philippine Historical Association, Center for Tarlaqueño Studies ng Tarlac State University, ang Palawan Study Center ng Palawan State University, ang Bacoor Historical Society at ng Cavite Historical Society. Yan po ay ilan lamang sa mga samahan, no, na eventually ay sa ngayon nagtutulong-tulong para mabuo itong ating programa. Siyempre, hikayat din natin ang ating mga kasamang mga study centers, iba't ibang mga probinsya, mga organization na mag-collaborate. Dahil sa panahon po ng pandemya, napakahirap po magkita magkita dahil meron nga tayong mga kulturin ng bawal ang face-to-face. Kaya itong webinar na ito ay malaking bagay. So, pwede po itong i-replicate sa iba't ibang mga lalawigan. No? Ngayon, siguro magandang gawin natin na i-share natin ito sa ating FB page. So, siguro pwede na tayong magsimula. No? Almost 9:30 na. Formal na po nating bubuksan ang ating programa ngayong umaga na ito. Magsisimula po tayo sa isang mga video presentation ng ating national anthem. Ito po ay susundan ng invocation. Ito po ay isang video na ecumenical at pagkatapos ay susundan ng himno ng Cavite. At inaanayahan po natin lahat ng ating mga manonood na tumayo habang pinapanood ang video ng national anthem. So siguro pwede na po natin i-play. Maraming salamat po.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم آمين يا رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم اجمع شمل المسلمين والكريستيان والأمة في مدينة دباو وسلم دائما مجتمعنا هذا بالسلم والأمن والتقدم في بلدنا هذا آمين يا رب العالمين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على خير خلقه سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين يا رب العالمين.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you today to praise and worship you and give you thanks for all the things you continue to provide for ourselves and our families. Father, we humbly ask for forgiveness for all the times we have offended you, when we forget to acknowledge your presence in the image of our brothers and sisters, and for moments we fail to be good stewards of the blessings you have given us. Continue to guide and protect each one of us, Lord, that we may always walk in the light of your everlasting love and mercy. Grant us, Father, with your comfort in times of distress and with your strength in times of weakness. Bestow upon us your unending grace and healing, that we may in turn become instruments of gentleness and compassion to others. We ask all this in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, with the prayer and the intercession of our Blessed Mother. Amen.
Manama, mawantog ka. Warag po ko ilingkoy ko. O Diyos, kahibulungan ka. Busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko.
In the last 500 years, Filipinos have fought for freedom, unity, and equality. We have made our mark in many fields, from science and medicine to culture and the arts. We are beacons of creativity, resourcefulness, resiliency, and compassion. In 2021, the Filipino people will join the world in commemorating one of the greatest achievements of mankind, the First Circumnavigation of the world. We celebrate this historic achievement by bannering an important message. Over adversity and struggles, we shall triumph, putting humanity first, always.
Kanina kung naipakilala na ang mga bagong commissioner ng National. Doc Manny, naririnig niyo po ba ako?
Opo, maliwanag po. Maliwanag.
Okay. Okay. So, hindi ko napansin kanina kung naipakilala na ng dalawa kong kasamahan ang mga bagong commissioners ng National Historical Commission. But in any case, I'll do it now. At kung bakit sila nandito at anong dahilan kung bakit sila ang napili. At nais kong ipagbigay alam sa lahat na isa po sa mga konsiderasyon kung bakit po sila ay nahirang na commissioner ay dahil po sa direksyon ngayon ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines na palaguin ang ating local history. Tatlo po ang nahalal na nahirang na bagong commissioner nito lamang panahon ng COVID. Si Dr. Manny Calairo from the Salle University na nakabase po siya sa Southern Tagalog at siya po ang inaatasan namin na makatuwang namin sa pagpapalaganap at pagpapalago ng ating kasaysayan simula po sa Southern Tagalog pababa po ng Southern Luzon. Si Dr. Lino naman na nakabase sa Gitnang Silangan, Central Luzon, siya naman po ay ating makakatuwang hindi lamang sa Central Luzon, pati na rin po sa Northern Luzon. Sa Kabisayaan naman po ay nahalal na komisyoner si Dr. Earl Jude Cleofe. Nakabase siya sa Dumaguete. Puro siya po yung inaatasan ko tuwang natin sa Western Visayas, sa Central Visayas, at pati na rin siguro sa Eastern Visayas. Kasi alam ko namang matalik na magkaibigan ito si Earl saka si Rolly Borrinaga na siya namang aking point person sa Eastern Visayas. Sa Mindanao naman, siguro alam nyo na mayroon na tayong matagal na kasama sa komisyon, si Dr. Abe Sakili, na siya namang kumakatawan lalong-lalo sa interes Muslim. At ito po mga nakaraang buwan, nakapag-touch base na rin po ang NHCP sa BARM at yung director po, si Director Salle ay regular na po nating kausap at kasama para naman po makasama rin natin sila sa ating mga activities. Siguro hindi naman lingid sa inyong kaalaman na tayo po ay nasa gitna ngayon ng isang napakalaking pagsubok. Ito po ang tinutukoy ko po yung problema natin sa COVID. Ang laki na po ng epekto nito sa ating ekonomiya, sa ating gobyerno, at pati na rin po sa mga usaping pinansyal. Ito pong nakaraang 2 buwan, hiningihan po kami ng update ng Department of Budget and Management kung alin po yung mga programa ng NHCP na sa tingin namin ay hindi na maitutuloy dahil nga po sa mga quarantine policies. At nagsoli na po kami ng halos 160 milyon para po ambag sa war chest ng gobyerno laban sa COVID. Nitong nakalaang linggo, nakatanggap na rin po ako ng liham galing sa DBM kung saan binabanggit na dahil sa kinoconsider na frontliner ang NHCP ay hindi po tayo mabibigyan ng malaking pondo sa ilan sa ating mga activities. Ganun pa man, hindi dapat ito maging dahilan para tayo malungkot, mawala ng pag-asa sapagkat kahit paano gagawin ko po na paraan para po masuportahan at mapondohan ang ating mga proyekto na sa tingin natin ay kaya nating patupad. Nabanggit kanina ng 2 nating kasamahan na ang LHCN ngayon ay isinailalim ko na sa Office of the Chairman. Ang Office of the Chairman po is a policy making and the decision making body, kaya lang may mga pagkakataon na kung nakikita ng ahensya, nakikita ko na ito ay kailangan at priority, meron naman pa akong opsyon para ito ipaisailalim sa aking opisina. At 2 po sa ngayon ang nakasalukuyan nasa ilalim ng Office of the Chairman ng NHCP, ito pong LHCN, saka po yung National Quincentennial Committee, kung saan ang iyong lingkod ay tumatayo bilang Vice Chairman at saka ang kanyang Executive Director. Kaya po, ito pong mga bagay na ito ay nagpapakita na ang LHCN ngayon ay naka-priority sa as far as the National Historical Commission is concerned. Meron pong 2 proyekto ang NQC, NHCP na gusto kong makatuwang ang LHCN. Ito po yung mga programa ng National Quincentennial Committee, lalong-lalo na yung project namin to mark the sites where the Magellan Expedition anchored all over the Philippines. Specifically, the Visayas and the Mindanao area. Hindi po sila nagawin ng Luzon. Kaya po yung mga taga-Luzon, sa ibang engagement na lang po tayo magkikita-kita. In a nutshell, the marking project will basically put a pedestal and a historical marker plus an artwork on those sites where the Magellan Expedition anchored or had an activity. We basically traced the journey of the Magellan Expedition using the accounts of Antonio Pigafetta by Albo and a few other eyewitness accounts written by the members of the expedition. And so far, we have identified how many? Almost, the latest is, I think we have identified 34 sites all over the country where we will be putting up markers. Now, I would like to solicit help and assistance from the members of the LHCN. So if ever your area, your region is considered part of the circumnavigation, kindly get in touch with us. And then we would like to enter into a partnership with you or with the institution where you're currently affiliated so that we can tap you and your institution as our local partner. I already wrote the Department of Interior and Local Government. I think I wrote also the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Visayan Affairs. I have written also the Department of Tourism, so all the regional offices of the DOT will be our partners. And then I think even the BARM will also be our partners. So magtulungan po tayo dito sa isang napaka-noble project na ito kasi ito po yung magiging ambag ng Pilipinas sa panukala o sa proyekto sa buong bansa, specifically ng Global Network of Magellanic Cities to request the UNESCO World Heritage Site to inscribe the Magellan Route as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So, malaking bagay po ito no, sa punto de vista ng turismo, punto de vista ng ating networking sa ibang bansa, at pati na rin po sa ating pagpapalago ng ating kasaysayan. Pangalawa, meron din po kaming pinaplano na magsagawa ng isang international at the same time national conference para po dito sa quincentennial. Nagkaroon na po kami ng preliminary meeting nito last week at mukhang maganda naman ang takbo at marami naman ang mga organisasyon na sumusuporta. So, hinihiling ko muli ang partisipasyon ng mga local historians natin na makisalamuha, makiisa at hindi lamang manood. I-encourage po rin po kayo na magbasa ng papel at para malaman ng buong mundo kung ano ang naging papel ng inyong mga local historians at pati na rin po yung partisipasyon ng inyong lugar sa isang napakahalaga at napaka-importanteng komemorasyon na ito na magaganap next year. Pangatlo, sa larangan din po ng publication. Nabanggit ko na po ito sa nung meeting natin noong nakarang buwan na meron po tayong journal local history at kami po ay bukas sa inyong mga publikasyon na kung sa tingin nyo ay gusto nyo itong i-disseminate using our platform. So be it. So ituloy po natin ang pagsusulat ng ating mga lokal na kasaysayan at nakahanda po ang NHCP at ang NQC na i-publicize ito. Hindi lang po artikulo ang aming pwedeng tanggapin. Nakahanda rin po kaming pondohan kung meron kayong mga book manuscripts na sa tingin nyo ay nararapat na i-disseminate national level. Nakahanda po ang NHCP na suportahan kayo sa mga activities na ito. Pang-apat, yun naman pong aming mga commemorations. Nakakalungkot isipin na mukhang lilipas ang 75th anniversary ng closing of the World War II na nasimula namin ito sa Leyte last year. Katapos, tinamaan po tayo ng COVID. Hindi ako nagkakamali. Ang huli ko yata ang engagement dito yung sa corridor. Ang dami sana ng listahan ng mga events sa iba't ibang lugar sa Pilipinas at nakikita ko sana, laki sana mag-iambag dito ng LHCN. Puro dahil po sa mga patakaran ng ATF ay hindi po natin ito may sasakatuparan. What I mean is itong mga physical commemorations. So malamang mauwi na lahat ito sa webinar. Panghuli, yun naman pong tungkol sa mga heritage issues. Marahil hindi, alam niyo po na isa sa mga mandato na NHCP ay pangalagaan ang ating mga tinatawag na built heritage. Okay? Sa patuloy na pag-unlad ng ating bansa, pagdami ng mga proyekto, ng mga sinasagawa ng DPWH, di ba, agensya ng gobyerno, may mga pagkakataon po na nakukompromiso ang ating mga heritage structures. So, kasama po sa trabaho namin ay pangalagaan itong mga built heritage na ito. Na harinawa ay huwag itong masira, huwag po itong baguhin ng ang mga tao sa kasalukuyan. Kaya po hinihingi ko po ang iyong ang suporta at maging mga vigilante. Na kapag mayroon pong mga important cultural properties sa inyong lugar na sa tingin nyo ay pinaplanong sirain o i-demolish, pwede po bang ipagbigay nyo alam ito sa amin o kaya naman paalalahanan niyo po ang mga nasa likod nito na kung maaari, bago po ituloy ang kanilang proyekto, ay isanggunin muna nila ito sa amin. Nang sa ganun, makapagbigay po kami ng opinyon kung ano po ang nararapat na gawin. Ang NHCP po ay hindi naman kami anti-development. Bukas din po kami at alam po namin na kailangan po nating magsagawa ng mga pagpapalapad ng kalsada, pagpapatayo ng mga bagong gusali dahil hindi na sapat ang espasyo na makasalubong ng gusali, pati na rin po sa DepEd. Alam natin na dumadami ang mga estudyante, kaya po yung mga gabaldon buildings natin kailangan na itong baguhin. So kaya lang, siguro pwede naman natin gawin ito na hindi kailangang sirain ang ating mga pamana ng bayan. So, pag may nababalitaan po kayo na mayroong ganitong mga programa, nawa, iparating niyo po sa amin ito para po magabayan namin ang mga nasa likod ng mga pangyayari ito. Nabanggit ito kanina ni Manny na nag-subscribe po kami sa Zoom ng pinakamataas na subscription. About more than 100 participants. So, ino-offer po namin itong platform na ito kung meron po kayong mga activities na sa tingin nyo ay kailangan nyo ng mas malawak na audience. Bukas po ang NHCP na ipagamit ang aming platform. Magkaroon lang po tayo ng advance notice kasi marami rin pong gumagamit dito. Kasama po kami dito. At gagawan po natin ang paraan na ito ay na kayo po ay mapagbigyan. Okay. So, muli, sa ngalan ng NHCP, sa ngalan din po ng National Centennial Committee, makakaasa po kayo ang suporta galing po sa dalawang ahensyang ito na kayo po ay matutulungan sa abot ng aming makakaya nang sa ganon. Ito pong programa natin na palaguin at payamanin ang local history ay may sakatuparan natin. Hindi lamang siguro sa aking administrasyon, pati na rin po sa mga susunod na pagpapatakbo ng NHCP. Kaya as much as possible, I'm trying to institutionalize everything. So that even at the time when I have to step down, give way to my successor, andyan na, in place na po itong mga infrastructures na ito. At maging aktibo at I would say, malakas na NHCN ang aking ipapamana sa susunod na administrasyon. So, muli, salamat ng marami. Cavite Studies Center, Manny, other participants, at I have to greet also our speakers, Amang Borrinaga, Lino. Good luck sa inyong lahat at mag-ingat po tayo. At harinawa, I wish you good health and always keep safe. Salamat.
Salamat po, Chairman. Ang ating pong Chairman, Dr. Rene R. Escalante, Chairman ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Naku po, ang napakaganda po ng kanyang mensahe. Karaniwan po ang mensahe, puro mga impormasyon. Ito po ay pagbibigay po ng oportunidad sa ating mga kababayan. Tayo po ay live, no? Nakikita tayo sa Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. At ang dami binanggit po ni Chairman na mga opportunity katulad po ng pag-anyaya sa atin para mga pagsaliksik, pag-participate sa mga paper presentations, magkaroon po ng publications, no? Kasi meron tayong mga local history sa program sa NQC at sabi nga ni Chairman kanina, even yung World War II medyo napapabayaan dahil nasa COVID, pero nandiyan po ang NHCP para tumulong. Ganun din po ang mga heritage initiatives, no? Dahil po ang NHCP ay bahagi din diyan para sa promosyon ng mga heritage. In fact, dito sa Cavite, meron kaming binubuo na Cavite Historical Trail kasi ang Cavite nga ay naging seatbelt of the Philippine Revolution. So yun po, no? At alam natin na maraming mga probinsya, mga lalawigan, bayan na merong mga heritage structures, no? Heritage places. So yan po ay sama-sama nating pagtuunan ng pansin sa tulong ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. So muli po, isang magandang umaga po para sa ating Chairman, Dr. Rene Escalante. Sa pagkakataon po na ito, since ang Cavite Studies Center po ay nasa Salle University, Dasmariñas, ay inimbitahan po natin na magbigay ng ilang pananalita ang ating Vice Chancellor for Academics and Research. Ito po ay walang iba kundi si Dr. Marco Esaez. Very active, energetic, at talagang hanga din ako dito. Sir, good morning po, Sir Marco.
Hello, good morning, sir. Am I audible? Ayan. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Greetings from De La Salle University, Dasmariñas. Magandang umaga sa ating Honorable Chair, Rene Escalante. We are very much thankful and honored to have been given this opportunity to work with the other local historical studies offices and the National Historical Commission of the Philippines for this online engagement. The university has always been supportive of endeavors that would promote a keen sense of history as found in its vision mission. It believes that we need to have a deeper understanding and appreciation of our narrative so that we could have a deeper understanding and appreciation of ourselves as a people. And while there may be different routes towards that narrative, towards the end or completion of that narrative, as suggested by today's topic, historiography, I think what's important is the end in mind is whatever route we take, who perspective we take, or whatever documents we appreciate or information that we take into consideration, it would ultimately help us develop a collective consciousness, shared consciousness as a people, because it's very important for us to move forward together as a nation. Mabuhay po kayong lahat at marami pong salamat, Sir Manny, at sa lahat ng uma-attend po ngayon.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Marco. At nakakatuwang pakinggan yung binanggit niya na ang De La Salle University Dasmariñas ay kabahagi sa heritage preservation ng lalawigan ng Cavite at kabahagi din sa pagbuo ng ating pambansang kasaysayan. Kaya ngayong araw po na ito ay muli ay natutuwa po tayo dahil tayo po ay live on Facebook, no? Mula sa Luzon, napapanood tayo sa Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, at meron po tayong mga speakers, no, na mapapakinggan ngayon na may kinalaman, no, sa lalo sa National Quincentennial Celebration. At tama lang yung oras natin, no? Isang minuto na lang, 10 o'clock na. At magsisimula na po tayo sa ating programa. No? Well, ang una po nating speaker ay medyo naipakilala na kanina. Napakilala na. Ito naman kailangan mo pakilala itong taong ito. Ito po ay very popular. Siya po siyang historian ng Tarlac. Pag sinabing Tarlac, alam na natin kung sino. No? Isa po siyang tagapagturo ng kasaysayan sa Tarlac State University at syempre pa partner, no, ng ating LHCN, ang Center for Tarlaqueño Studies. No? Siya po ang director ng center. At marami na po siyang nasulat ng mga aklat. At kamakailan lang po nabanggit na ni Dr. Escalante na isa po siya sa mga nahirang na commissioner ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. Ang tinutukoy ko po ay walang iba kundi ang ating kaibigan, mahal nating kaibigan at magaling na scholar, Dr. Lino Dizon. Sir, magandang umaga po.
Magandang umaga po. Mula sa Tarlac, no, hanggang dyan sa Cavite. Sir Manny at mga iba, si chairman kanina at iba pang bahagi nitong napakahalagang webinar sa historiographiya sa panahon ng pandemic. So ang topic ko po ay bahagi ng masasabi natin sa pag-aaral, no, sa historiographiya ng mga colonial sources o yung bahagi siya ng Philippine colonial history. Naging party po kasi ako ng Cavite Studies dati, no, bilang writer in residence, at ito yung naging huli kong trabaho, no. Castallanes de Cavite, Proto-Provincial Administrative History, 1609 to 1898. So, these undertakings are based Cavite's pre-provincial administrative history under the vara or the tutelage of its politico-military heads, called in the incipient years as the Castellanes de Cavite. It involves the transpiration and conjunction of events starting 1609 with the establishment of Port San Felipe at then Cavite Puerto, the initiation of the galleon industry and trade, and the installation of its head, the said Castellan or Alcaide, to govern as well the surrounding encomiendas and pueblos, forming eventually the Cavite province, until the exasperation of the Spanish colonial regime in 1898. By providing micro-historical treatment of these early politico-military heads of Cavite and their functions, services, and in many instances, controversies, this undertaking's ultimate aim is to contribute in the documenting of provincial administrative history, especially in the still misty and mystified early colonial period. So, yung kakabuuan po noong design of this undertaking, para lang may idea kayo, of course, which is impossible to discuss now yung kabuuan kasi nga very limited on time. So, yung work will be discussing on the Plaza de Cavite, notes on early colonial build-up of Cavite and its environs, yung first century ng pagkakaroon ng mga Castallanes de Cavite, the incipient history, and then magkakaroon ng intervention yan magkakaroon ng interregnum, yung the British occupation interlude from 1762 to 1764. And then, Los Ultimos de Castellanes, yung ultimate years, So, micro-historical treatment ito ng remaining Castellanes hanggang sa revolution na ito, na magiging rin sa Cavite. So, bakit 1609, ang aking start? Prolegomena, Fundación de Cavite and its vicissitudes. Iterto, Caviteños are baffled on the actual date of the founding of their beloved province. Starting, of course, yung work ng isang famous work on Cavite, yung kay Dr. Soledad Borromeo Bueller, that pointed out on 1614 as its foundation year. And this is actually the widely accepted in most publications. Sadly, this could not be supported by a solid document, however. So the Cavite Studies of De La Salle University, Dasmariñas, has taken upon itself to direct this lacuna by nagkaroon po ng symposium, La Fundación de la Provincia de Cavite, a journey to investigation, where the center invited historians and specialists, pati na sa NHCP and Cavite Local Historical Societies. Many facts have been provided in this gathering. It was found out, for example, that the popularly accepted 1614 was initially purported. I will be sharing some of this. Para lang magkaroon tayo ng basis, yung 1609 in the history of Cavite, yung significance ng 1609 in Cavite's provincial history. So, first about the 1614, yung popularly accepted founding year of the province of Cavite. Kung makikita niyo po, so, halimbawa, yung official website ng Provincial Government of Cavite, nakapokus pa rin sa 1614. Yan. At ang basis ng 1614 ay mula ito sa work ni Agustin de la Cabada. Historia Geographica, Geologica y Estadística de Filipinas. Nasa volume 1, Pero ang tinutukoy po ni Agustin de Cabada ay halimbawa sa Cavite 1614, Ang tinutukoy niya yung Cavite Puerto. which was not the province, no? And then, magiging popular po ito with the census of the Philippine Islands, no? During the American period. Ayan. So, doon sa kanilang geographical sketch ng Cavite, yan. Cavite was created a politico-military province in 1614. No? So, wala nang analysis ng source. So, balik po tayo sa topic natin. So, many probable and logical dates have been provided, no, that are more realistic than 1614. Halimbawa dyan, yung 2nd of June, 1576, concerning the first encomienda sa in the Philippines, that included the Port of Cavite. Yung 16th of July, 1571, with Cavite Province of Yor becoming a part of the Encomienda de Corona de Manila, or that of 14th of August 1596, no? With the province being under the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of the Archbishopric of Manila, among others. But 1609 is very exciting, no? There was also an offering that the foundation year should be synchronous with the founding of the Fuerza de San Felipe Neri, now Fort San Felipe in Cavite City, no? That is 1609. The year that catapulted as well the building of galleons in the Puerto, being the icon of the Castallanes de Cavite and his evolution as the politico-military governor of the whole province as well, with the passage of the centuries. No? So, yung symposium has left more questions than answers. No? Like itong present undertaking, mas maraming katanungan ang mangyayari. This does not mean that it was not able to achieve its objective, no? Rather similar to the unyielding and relentless pursuits of the CSC concerning its essays and essays on Cavite's historical and cultural heritage. Itong enterprise na ito, for the sake of history, is already its reward, no? Sabi nga nung participant, no? Isang participant, unfortunately, na namaalam na, si late Dr. No, Virgilio Pilapil, sabi niya, thank you for the opportunity to be able to deliberate on the foundation year of our beloved province, which is usually taken for granted. No? For indeed, the symposium has opened my mind to take cognizance of its heritage. Now, para lang magka-idea tayo on the background, Castallanes de Cavite, so historical heuristics, yung actual head of the Castillo or Fuerza de Cavite was known for some time as the Castellan de Cavite. In the case of Philippine colonial history, the role of the Castellan or its Spanish form of Castellano was downplayed. In fact, not given importance, no? Or worse, not at all mentioned in early studies on colonial bureaucracy or administrative history. It was usually lumped with the presentation of politico-military units, no? Or corregimientos. Walang particular study on the Castellano de Cavite, no? As a unique arrangement in early administrative history. Castellano, which is undeniably European provenance, stems from the Latin, no, Castellanus, derived from the castellum or the castle, no? As a political position in most European countries, especially during the Middle Ages and the centuries, dealing with the domination of the Western colonial power, it was sometimes, no, also known as constable, governor of the castle district or the captain, no? At the period of incipience, a Castellan was the governor or captain of a Castellani and the latter's castle, no, being the centerpiece. Kaya nakita niyo yung importansya, no, noong Fort San Felipe, no, bilang Castillo at bilang namamahala sa distrito niyo, no? A Castellani or Castellana in Spanish, on the other hand, is a term denoting an administrative district under the said Castellan, no? And it means the extent of territory and jurisdiction belonging to a given castle. So, yung evolution po ng Castellan towards historiography, no? So, for the purposes of this undertaking, it is very important to reenact the roles of the Castellans, no? Played in their emergence and evaluate their applicability in the evolution of their position in the Caviteño colonial society. As already mentioned, both the Castellan and the Castellanes were emergents, no, from the Western medieval period. Now, the case of Cavite. Among recent scholars who took more than a casual glance about the Castellan de Cavite was Shelleyfish, no, in a monumental the Manila Acapulco galleons, the treasure ships of the Pacific, no, published in 2011. Discussing about Cavite Puerto, he says, the port was operated by a manager or superintendent known as the Castellan. So medyo hindi rin maganda, no? Yung pananaw din ni Shelleyfish, he was not selected for his familiarity with naval matters, no? But for his connections to officials who were already working in the government. The job of a shipyard manager was given to a Spaniard who was usually a relative or a protege of the governor and had little or no naval experience, no? This was also a position which could be purchased from the governor for a sum of money or some other sort of gift. So her consideration for the position, as can be gleaned, is rather simplistic, usually based from what was obvious on the expedients at hand. Such estimation was justifiable. Documentation on the Castallanes of Cavite at the outset were usually due matters, no, involving appointments and solicitations for increase in salaries or remunerations, requests or recommendations in behalf of a relative or an associate, business or pecuniary matters, especially with the galleon trade and as most allegations of corruption. But it will be fruitful, no, for the purposes of the present study, which we hope, no, that the Cavite studies will be able to share to the public, to examine intently the role of the Castellanes in the provincial history of Cavite. Delving on the available documents concerning them can shed further light, no, on the political-administrative intricacies of these Castellanes de Cavite. By treating these Castellanos on their individual merits or demerits, as the case may be, certain particulars, no, can be brought up. For example, yung Castellano Antonio Fernandez de Rojas, no, was treated in an extensive biography by the noted scholar, no less than Maria Lourdes Diaz Trechuelo, which showed that he was a prized and expert navigator, and thus much familiar with naval matters, no, na hindi nakita ni Shelleyfish, no, sa kanyang pag-aaral, no. Okay, yung hojas de servicios or the service records, though archives mostly for purposes of increase in emoluments, they speak of the various achievements of the appointed Castellanos of Cavite, worthy of in-depth biographical studies in colonial history. So, yun po ay mula kay Maria Lourdes Diaz Trechuelo, yung kanyang biographical study, no, ay Antonio Fernandez de Rojas, no, na naging Castellano de Cavite. Ito po yung halimbawa ng isang petition, no. So, yung next topic ko, no, naka 15 minutes na pala ako, I was only given 30 minutes, ay ano ba ang trabaho? What was the work of the Castellano de Cavite? So itong petition, no, mula kay isang Castellano de Cavite, Petición, si el General de Don Atanasio Fernández y Guevara, ¿no? Vecino de esta ciudad, alcaide y castellano de Castillo y Fuerza de San Felipe, el puerto de Cavite y capitán, etc. No? So itong analysis na ito will show ano ba ang isang Castellano de Cavite. So ito po ay sample, no? Marami po ito, mga almost 50 plus, kaya hindi tayo matatapos. I will just show some examples, no? So yung peticiones, nombramientos, or appointments or nominations, or even pleitos, litigations, and related documents on these Castellanos provide insights on the evolution of the position, especially in Cavite, no? Among those interesting to consider, no, yung pinakita ko kanina, were those of Castellano General Atanasio Fernandez de Guevara, no? So, naging Castellano siya from 1710 to 1717. Prepared during the initial score of the 1700s, a time when the Castellano position was more or less formalized. His lengthy description of his appointment or title provides the multifaceted task he was supposedly performing. No? In one document, after the promotion, yung pinakita ko kay Francisco, yung predecessor niya, no? Francisco Chensa Ibanez, o Ibanez, in other documents, he supplied the following. No? So yung Castellano is also known as the Alcaide y Castellano de la Fuerza San Felipe, no? Yung Port San Felipe ito, del Puerto y Rivera de Cavite y Capitán de la Reina de las Compañías de Infantería Española y su guarnición en lugar del Sargento Mayor, etc. Yung kanyang assistant. In a petition, he furnished yung kanyang title, no? Alcaide y Castellano del Castillo y Fuerza San Felipe del Puerto de Cavite y Capitán de Reina de las Compañías de Infantería Española que milita en el Gobernador y Justicia Mayor de dicho puerto y jurisdicción. So, dito pa lang masisilip natin na yung kanyang influence is not only in the castle but in the whole district. So, as an alcaide, the document provides a synonym for the Castellano, yung alcaide, no? Which was used in the 1700s, at least the initial quarter, as a substitute title for the Castellan. So, though available in the Spanish language, some considered it to be of Portuguese provenance. In Portugal, a Castellan was known as an alcaide. If it shipped through the honorifics of the period, especially in the Palawan Cavite Puerto, it should be noted that when Governor General Juan de Silva started the structure of the Puerto de San Felipe in 1609, the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal were under a common monarch. In fact, yung Dutch attacks that led to the construction and extra attention over Cavite from the Spanish colonial government in the Philippines was due to the latter's unification. So, magandang understanding yan, o magandang connection if we connect it with the concern of the quincentennial, no? Yung Spanish-Portuguese union, no? Back to the case of Portugal later, yung role of the alcaide became an honorary title awarded by the Portuguese king or monarch to certain nobles, no? Yung term alcaide would become important in Philippine administrative or bureaucratic history. It can be related to the provenance of alcalde, a Filipino term for municipal or city mayor that is still used nowadays. Alcaide or alcalde, of course, was originally intended for the bureaucrat in an alcaldía, which is equivalent to the present-day provincial governor during the Spanish colonial period. Of another interest will be the term Portuguese alcaide pequeño. The Spaniards will be applying the term gobernadorcillo or petty governors for the heads of pueblos or towns. Now, another title of the Castellano de Cavite, he was also the Justicia Mayor, no? Another title of note was the Castellano de Cavite as the Justicia Mayor of the area. So yung the Castellan in initial phases was also the main administrator of justice in his locality, thus the Cavite territory. Fray Juan Delgado, Father Juan Delgado, a Jesuit, in a work of 1751, though published only in 1892, cites the connection of the position of the Justicia Mayor with that of Castellano in the case of Cavite, no? Which I translate. No? Cavite has a Justicia Mayor, independent of the other provinces, who is also the Castellan of the Royal Port of San Felipe, no? Which is at the same point and opening of the port, whose jurisdiction extends until Bacoor, Cavite El Viejo, which is Kawit now, San Roque, and Binakayan. So we see yung influence ng Castellano was not only sa puwersa o sa port, but in the whole district. No? It is important to relate the development of the term Justicia Mayor with that of the Corregidor. No? For some time, in certain localities of Spain, a Castellan was also called as El Corregidor Castellano, which purports, no, yung kanyang role as a provincial governor also. Okay. The Castellano was also the Capitan, no? The Castellan of Cavite was also the head of the Spanish forces in the locality. As mentioned in the Fernandez document, he was particularly the Capitán de Reina de las Compañías de Infantería Española y su guarnición en lugar, being the captain of the royal companies of the Spanish infantry and its garrison in the place. No? As already presented, the initial military force was the one placed by Governor General Juan de Silva around 1609 nga, in his campaign against the Dutch. However, there is no definite military formation in the Puersa that could be cited, except the one in 1753. No? So this was from a 1753 work, no? Cavite Puerto in 1753. So enclosed in a red box, ito yung Puersa de San Felipe. No? And ito yung material, no? Book on the Puersa de San Felipe and the Castellano de Cavite in 1753. So, yung complete title, no? Descripciones con planos y figuras de la etc. Puerto de Cavite. Descriptions with plans and figures of the capital of Manila, Port of Cavite, etc. No? List of artillery and exchange, weapons, war supplies, etc. The endowment of plaza that they have, salaries, rations, and vestuaries that they enjoy, yung salaries, etc. Now, part 2, description that include, no? Yung personnel, dotation of the agencies in Cavite, Puerto, those of the Spaniards as well as the Pampangans. No? Kaya kapag may maraming apelidong Pampangan dyan sa Cavite, we could trace it, no? With the development of the Puersa de Cavite. Supplies, rations, and the clothing provided annually, the Artillera Montada in the port and Castle of San Felipe, the Rivera, and other bulwarks that serve as a defense in the vicinity of Cavite Puerto, with the necessary operation, the weapons of the soldiers, of the Spanish and the Pampangan, not very particular, yung Kapampangan soldiers in Cavite, infantry of Cavite Puerto, and the artillery serving on galleons and other vessels, no? So, ito yun, yung personnel, no? Nakalagay dito, ano yung composition, no? Noong army or the infantry. of the Castellano de Cavite, no? At ang sabi ko nga, very particular dyan, yung mga very special mention yung mga Kapampangan soldiers, no? So, isang early work on the isang early work na which I was able to see, no, on the Plaza de Cavite in the 1850s was the one by Rafael Diaz Arenas, no? Memorias is 5 minutes na lang pala ako. Rafael Diaz Arenas, Memorias Históricas y Estadística de Filipinas in the 1850s, no? It was headed by one called Castellano or Justice Mayor who commanded this plaza, second in order to that of Manila, with qualifications equal to the ordinary alcaldes, no? So we see here really yung importance ng Castellano, no? As the alcalde or a provincial governor who used to go to Cavite in the requisition of supplies. It was a Captain General who titled him governor, no? That even without the approval of His Majesty, as stated in the Nuevo Cedulario, has prevailed, notwithstanding. At sa time nga ni Diaz Arenas, he was really the chief of the province, no? So we continue from Diaz Arenas. There were no regular, I think this was from Father Juan Delgado, there were no regular fortifications until 1815. At present, these were augmented with the defense plan approved by His Majesty in a royal decree of March 21, 1819. The old fortifications of the castle and the royal fort of San Felipe were constructed in the time of the first Castellano, Don Francisco de Atienza in 1690. So ito ay yung pag-identify sa first Castellano, si Don Francisco de Atienza was from Father Juan Delgado, which 1609. Pero as I check on the manuscript on available sources, nagkaroon na ng first Castellano since 1609, hindi 1690. So yung nakalagay daw sa Port San Felipe nung time ni Diaz Arenas, it was around 1690 na nagkaroon tayo ng first Castellano. But no, based on my findings, as early as 1609, no? Okay. Subsequently, with the Castellano, among the more popular Castellano was of course the Marquis of Salinas, no? Various works of fortification were done, like buildings, warehouses, etc. Of course, yung legacy will be the name Salinas, no? In Rosario, Cavite. Na hindi na alam, of course, nung most Caviteño, no? Bakit Salinas ang pangalan, no? But it was named after the Marquis de Salinas, no? A former Castellano of Cavite. So, sample lang sana ito, yung Castellanos de Cavite, the initiatory years, no? Prosography or collective biographies of the following, no? So, yung 1609 to 1690, pinakita ko, there were many Castellanos, no? Even before kay Francisco Atienza de Ibanez, no? So, in the work that I am doing, I am giving the honor, no? The first Castellano de Cavite to the Governor General himself who initiated, no? Yung pagkakaroon ng Fort San Felipe, si Governor General Juan de Silva, beginning 1609, no? Unfortunately, naging ambitious siya, no? In pursuing the Dutch, he was actually planning to attack, no? Singapore. Unfortunately, he died, no? In that campaign. So, yung mga early, halimbawa, Captain Sebastian Perez de Acuña, ganyan, no? And then Gaspar Alvarez, Almirante Andres Lopez de Alsadegui. Okay. Parang summary na lang. By this time, there was something about being general or commander of the galleons, no? Kasi isang important contribution ng pagkakaroon ng Castellano de Cavite, yung ang pag-aaral sa galleon, no? The post was a lucrative and much sought after one, sabi nga ni C.R. Baxter, no? Not on the account of the pay, which was not extravagant, but on the account of the perks and pickings that went with it legitimately and otherwise. Sabi naman ni Padre Pedro Murillo sa kanyang Historia de Pilipinas, who considered that being such, no? As a Castellano, it was the most profitable among the occupation, no? A number of the Castellanos de Cavite were also appointed as commanders of galleons for Nueva España or Mexico, no? So, marami pa dapat, kaya lang, it is only a sampling, no? Of the importance of the Castellano de Cavite in Cavite study of proto-administrative history. So yung Plaza de Cavite, headed by the Castellano de Cavite, merong yan prospects, no, for heritage studies and advocacy. So as a concluding part, yung undertaking assesses the impact and implication of the study to the heritage advocacy for Cavite province, especially sa kanyang proto-administrative history. So I think naka 30 minutes na po tayo. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Lino Dizon. At ang kanya pong presentasyon ay pagpapakita po ng isang exercise of archival research. No? Tinitingnan ko nga dun sa question and answer portion, baka mayroon na mag-post. Wala, siguro nagugulat sila. Ano ba ito nagsasabi ni Dr. Dizon? Kasi nga, ito ay tungkol sa panahon ng Kastila. At para bigyan natin ng konting background ng ating mga kababayan, lalo na dito sa Cavite, mahalaga po yung foundation ng mga lalawigan. No? At dito sa tinatalakay po ni Dr. Dizon, kung di ako nagkakamali, ito isang alternatibo, no? Pag-aaral para tukuyin ang founding, no? Ng Cavite. Tama po ba, sir?
Opo.
Imagine, founding. Yan po ay mula po sa governor's office, meron kami instruction, no, na pag-aralan. At ito po, napapanood po tayo sa iba't ibang lugar na ito po yung isang inisyatibo ng isang historian para ungkatin, pag-aralan at tukuyin ang mismong pundasyon ng lalawigan ng Cavite. At yan po ay na-present po ni Dr. Dizon sa kanyang mga dokumento, sa kanyang presentasyon, no? Kaya lamang siguro para makapag-react ka talaga ng actively ay dapat nabasa mo ang mga dokumento na ito. At bihirang-bihira na po sa panahon ngayon, no? Bihirang-bihira po ang mga researchers na same time archivists, no? Kasi napakahirap po na mag-research ngayon. Pero kaya naman kung talagang dibdiban ng iyong pagsaliksik, no? At sir, maraming salamat po. So siguro na lang medyo kasi bago pa lang ang ating webinar, no? Siguro marami pa pumapasok, marami pang hindi nakakapanood, pero ito pong mga lectures natin ay automatically, no, may po-post sa FB pages ng NHCP, LHCN at NQC sa kanilang mga videos. So doon sa mga hindi pa nakakapanood ngayon, recorded to, pwede pong mapanood din sa iba-ibang FB page ng mga nabanggit ko na ahensya. So it's already 10:35, actually medyo delay po tayo. No? Kaya since wala naman pong mga tanong pa, pwede na po tayong tumuloy doon sa ikalawang speaker natin. Ito na po yung tuluyang tumutukoy siguro doon sa National Quincentennial celebration, no? Bago yung founding of towns, circumnavigation. At ito yung pagdating ng grupo ni Fernando Magallanes o Magellan dito sa Pilipinas. Pero marami po sa atin ang hindi talaga nakakaalam. Pag sinabi kasing Magellan, baktan, di ba? Pero ano nga ba talaga yung mga ruta na dinaanan? At ako mismo bilang siguro writer of history, no? Nagulat din ako na talaga palang merong mga pinuntahang mga lalawigan ng ating mga ang tropa ni Magellan at isa nga rito ang Palawan. So, isa sa mga scholar na nag-aral dito ay isang first professor ng um, Palawan State University. At dahil sa kanyang pagpupunyagi para itanyag ang identity ng mga Palawenyo, siya po ay kinuha bilang direktor ng Palawan Studies Center. So very active po siya sa LHCN, sa Local History Communities Network, at very active din po sa Palawan collaboration sa LGU at mga NGOs. Ang tinutukoy ko po ay si Professor Michael Angelo Doblado. At ang kanyang ibabahagi sa atin ngayon ay may kinalaman doon sa Rediscovering the Palawan Route, the Magellan-Elcano Voyage. Sir Mike, good morning sa iyo. Magandang umaga po. Nakapasok na po ba tayo?
Good morning. Good morning, Doc Manny.
Yes, sir. Video po, medyo naka-stick pa tayo video. Medyo mahina signal siguro. Ayan, ready na. So, ayan, si Sir Mike, no, nakikita na natin. So, siguro pwede na niyang simulan ng kanyang presentation para makita natin. Ito pong paper ni Professor Mike Doblado ay personal na inisyatibo para saliksikin ang mga kaganapan sa Palawan during the Magellan Voyage. At kung di ako nagkakamali ay naging bahagi na rin to ng reference, no, ng NQC. So sir, good morning. Yes sir, pwede niyo po simulan ang inyong presentation. Salamat po.
Again, Doc Manny, Commissioner Manny, no, Calairo, thank you very much po. Bumabati ako ng good morning sa lahat po ng nakikibahagi dito sa ating live streaming na webinar. Pero bago po sana ako mag-umpisa, papasalamat muna po ako kay, personally, no, kay Chairman Rene Escalante, Doc Rene Escalante, kasi we had a meeting 2019 summer at isa nga ako sa kanyang inatasan na mag-assist to locate yung Palawan landfall ng Magellan-Elcano Expedition. Also, nagpapasalamat din ako sa kanilang senior researcher na si Mr. Ian Alfonso dahil marami po siyang ibahagi ng mga additional na primary sources na nagamit po rito sa ating analysis. Also, syempre nagpapasalamat ako ulit kay Doc Manny dahil nabigyan niya kami ng pagkakataon dito sa Palawan Studies Center ng Palawan State University na may bahagi aming local na contribution, no, sa pagpapalawig ng lokal na kasaysayan, hindi lamang ng lalawigan ng Palawan kundi ng Pilipinas. And bago ko makalimutan, special thanks din kay retired Professor Oscar Evangelista. Hindi po mangyayari ito dahil siya po ay nagsilbing inspiration sa amin dito sa Palawan State University sa pag-aaral po ng kasaysayan. So, uumpisahan ko na po, no, Manny. So, nakikita?
Wala pa po. Share screen lang po ang yung PowerPoint.
Sir Manny, naka-share na po.
Okay. Siguro medyo delayed lang. Hintay po natin ang sharing ng PowerPoint ni Sir Mike. So we're just waiting. Meron tayong technical difficulty.
Sumikat sa iyo, o bayan kong mutya, ang dakilang araw ng galak at tuwa, at ang kalayaan, matamis na lubha, siyang nakabalik.
Mukhang mahina ang signal ni Sir Mike. Hindi po nakashare.
Pasensya na po, malayo eh.
Oo nga.
Na-send ko na rin yung PowerPoint kay Sir Jerwil.
Aha. Yun po, inasikaso po kayo ng secretariat. Pero siguro, pwede nyo lang simulan kahit paano yung inyong presentation para at least background there doon sa inyo. Paano nyo ba nabuo yung paper na ito? Bakit nyo ginawa ito? No? Ano ba ang impact nito? Posible sa Palawan? Medyo mahirap po ang ang ating signal dahil si Sir Mike po ay nasa Palawan ngayon. Kung na nakakamali sa kanyang group, signal niya ito. No? Meron pang mga mga captions yung yung shelter. So yes, Sir Mike.
Kasi ilo-load na lang po ng secretariat yung PowerPoint.
Ayun, niloload na lang. Sir, kung narinig niyo ako, pwede niyo ikwento yung bakit ba kayo nagka-interest dito sa topic na ito? Of course, siya Palawan kayo, no? Wala ang ating video.
Sir Manny, bumalik na ako.
Ayan, okay. Yan, medyo maliwanag. From Palawan po.
Okay, ang kwento po kasi nito, kung matatandaan nyo, galing po kami sa Baler ng national meeting ng LHCN sa Baler. At that time then, ongoing na po pala yung pagre-research ng mga lugar kung saan naglanding yung Magellan-Elcano Expedition. No? So nakakausap po natin si Chairman Rene Escalante at tayo nga po yung naatasan. So siguro susimulan ko na po, yung significance po ng pag-aaral na to, ito po yung naging position paper po na sinasubmit po o naipasa na po ng Palawan Studies Center ng Palawan State University sa National Historical Commission of the Philippines. No? Ang kanya pong pangunahing layunin ay ma-identify ang landfall areas in Palawan para po sa quincentennial celebration of the First Circumnavigation of the world. So dahil po ang Palawan Studies Center ay parte o miyembro ng Local Historical Committee Network, LHCN. So mandato rin po ng Palawan Studies Center na makibahagi at tumulong sa adhikain ng National Historical Commission of the Philippines. At yung isa pa pong mahalaga ay mapunan po sana yung gap sa local history ng Palawan. Kasi po hindi po maliwanag kung ano po yung mga pangyayari o kaganapan bago dumating ang Kastila at doon sa una nilang pagdating dito sa Palawan. Okay. Ano-ano po ba yung mga challenges po na kinaharap ng pananaliksik na to o pag-aaral na to? Unang-una po, bihira ang mga studies na nakapag-identify ng mga Palawan landing sites. No? Kung meron man, kadalasan ito ay nababanggit na in passing lamang po or general or brief tones. Hindi po talaga nakatutok. So, wala pong specific na study o papel na nag-aral po para i-identify yung mga landing sites dito sa lalawigan ng Palawan. So, yung possible landfall sites po are presented as calculated guess or citing other sources. So, gaya ng nabanggit ko na nauna, hindi po specific, no? Lagi po siya nababanggit sa mga pag-aaral in general. Land po sa Palawan pero hindi po natutukoy o natuntun kung saan. At meron din po yung tinatawag nating challenge dahil meron pong mga kwento na ang Magellan-Elcano Expedition ay nakapag-anchor sa Puerto Princesa, sa Taytay at saka sa Cuyo. No? Kadalasan po maririnig siya pero hindi ito ma-declare ng mga LGU kasi wala naman pong batayan na pananaliksik. Hindi po siya nakabase sa isang pag-aaral. So ito po yung metodolohiya na ginamit sa pag-aaral, no? Sa historiography. So we made comparison of primary sources, particularly po yung kay Antonio Pigafetta's account, the unnamed Genoese pilot's notes, at saka yung logbook Dorotero ni Francisco Albo. At nagkaroon din po ng paghahalintulad o paghahambing ng mga mapa ng Palawan na gawa ni Akda ni Gastaldi, ni Mercator, Ortelius at saka ni Murillo. At nagkaroon din po ng pag-aaral sa mga pre-Hispanic people na maaaring nag-come into contact sa expedition's crew. And then, ikinumpara rin po ang pag-aaral na to doon sa isang pag-aaral na ginawa ni Professor Oscar Colliker, 1912, na nag-attempt din po na i-trace ang ruta ng pinagdaanan o nilandingan ng expedition dito sa Palawan. At isa pa pong mahalaga na bahagi ng historiography, yung pag-analyze sa navigational coordinates or ship's bearing na provide po ng mga nabanggit nating primary sources or eyewitness account. So, ang research approach po to identify the landing sites in Palawan, so ginamit po ang primary source, Pigafetta, Genoese pilot, Francisco Albo, data regarding Palawan. So, andito po, masusi po namin pinag-aralan yung narratives and place names. Halimbawa po, Bibalon, Balaba, which means Balabak, Simbonbon, Jagusam, Digwakani, at saka yung Palawan. So, prinesenta rin po namin dito yung mga bearings provided po ng Pigafetta and Albo accounts. And we cross-reference using modern GPS application yung mga binigay na bearings or navigational coordinates ng mga sources. And then at the end of the research, nag-design po kami ng plausible historical narratives based on the eyewitness account para po magkaroon ng sense, to make sense of the sequencing of the landfall in Palawan. So, kung maaari po sanang kung i-flash na po sa screen, no? So, ito po yung excerpts from the sources. So, yung sa Genoese pilot po, ang sabi niya sa kanya account, and fell in with a large island and ran along the coast of this island to the northeast and reached as far as 9 degrees and a half. So 9 degrees and a half. Yung sa report naman po ni Francisco Albo, and this coast runs northeast, southwest, and the cape in dulo po, northeast part is 9 degrees and 1/3 minutes, and the part of southwest is in 8 degrees south with 1/3 minutes. Yun po ang kay Francisco Albo. Ang sumunod naman po ay kay Antonio Pigafetta. Ito ay base sa kanyang description. That island lies in a latitude of 9 1/3 degrees towards the Arctic pole and longitude of 171/3 degrees. It is called Palawan. So sa kauna-unahang pagkakataon po, nabanggit po sa Pigafetta Chronicles ang pangalan mismo ng lalawigan. Okay, ito po, no? Binababa na po, challenges faced. Doon na po tayo sa research approach to identify the landing sites. Okay, stop muna po. So ito po yung binabanggit natin kanina, ang paggamit ng primaryang batis, yung galing kay Pigafetta sa Genoese pilot at kay Francisco Alba. So regarding Palawan. So uulitin ko po yung narratives, yung pagkwento po nila at ang pagbanggit nila ng mga pangalan, specifically Bibalon, Balaba, Simbonbon, Jagusam, Diagocani, and Palawan. Pinag-aralan din po namin ang bearings, o tinatawag nating navigational coordinates provided by these primary sources. Yung north, 9 degrees and 1/3 ni Albo, north, 9 degrees and 1/2 ni Pigafetta, at saka yung north, south, 8 degrees and 1/3 ni Albo, using extant maps or contemporary maps of Palawan. Ang mga bearings po na to ay cross-reference po natin using modern GPS applications and the accounts of the sources. Pero dito po ay meron tayong tinatawag na pag-iingat dahil hindi po natin pwedeng kunin sa face value yung navigational bearings na binigay po ng ating mga sources dahil po may marami pong pagkakamali o sa pagtansya ng distansya na minsan o kalimitan nagkakaroon po ng difference between doon sa ni-report po nila na distance at doon po sa actual na distance ng mga lugar na yan sa kasalukuyan. So ang difference po ay naglalaro minsan sa pagitan ng 30 to 40 kilometers. So kinakailangan po tanggapin natin siya, gawin natin po siyang guide, pero hindi po natin siya 100% na aasahan. And then we identify the approximate areas on contemporary maps of Palawan. Pagkatapos mong magawa ito, kinakailangan pong gumawa tayo ngayon, mag-design, mag-craft tayo ng plausible historical narratives based on eyewitnesses to make sense of the sequencing of the landfall events. Next slide, please. So ito na po yung mga excerpts o narrative from the sources. So sa Genoese pilot po, fell in with a large island and ran along the coast of this island, northeast, reached as far as 9 degrees and a half. Kay Francisco Albo naman po, makikita nyo, northeast part is in 9 1/3 degrees. Tapos yung south po na binigay niya na bearings ay 8 degrees and 1/3 minutes. No? Kay Antonio Pigafetta naman po, 9 1/3 degrees north, and pinangalanan niya na po ang lalawigan, first po na pagkakataon sa kanya accounts, ang pangalan na Palawan. Next slide, please. So ito po makikita, ito na po yung i-plinat po natin siya sa isang table para makita natin yung pagkakahalintulad o pagkakaiba. Makikita po natin na yung Genoese pilot ay nagbigay ng kanyang bearing kung saan ang limit ng naabot po ng expedition sa norte. Ganon din po si Albo at si Pigafetta. Yung limit po ng naabot nila sa Timog, Palawan. Ang nakapagbigay lamang po ng bearing, navigational coordinate, sa naabot nila sa south, mali pala, kanluran pa pala yung naunang dalawa, ang nakapagbigay lamang po ng limit po o hangganan ng naabot nila sa Timog, Palawan ay si Albo with 8 degrees and 20 minutes. Next slide, please. So ito po yung magiging graphical representation, kung makikita nyo po sa inyong mga screen. So meron po tayong 9 and 30 degrees, 30 minutes, at meron tayong 9 and 20, and then yung south. So yung linya po na yan, mula south hanggang north, yan po yung extent po ng kanilang binyahe. Nung makarating sila sa Palawan, sa mainland Palawan, galing sila sa kanilang paglalayag mula sa Cagayan de Tawi-Tawi or Mapon today. Next slide, please. So, kung makikita nyo doon sa naunang mapa, dalawang bayan po yung sakop noon sa kasalukuyan, Nara at Aborlan. Pero dito po sa Murillo Velarde map, makikita na yung buong Nara at Aborlan ay ang Old Aborlan area. So, dalawang bayan po ang sakop niya, at ang haba po ng bayan na ito o lugar na ito nung unang panahon ay tumatakbo po ng 100 kilometro. Sa katunayan po, ang malaking bahagi ng Puerto Princesa ay dating parte po ng Old Aborlan na siya pong ancestral domain ng mga Tagbanwa. Next slide, please. So, limit of south to north expedition. The expedition terminating their northern exploration, they would have anchored somewhere along the Aborlan-Nara area. So, din po sa ating papel o sa ating pag-aaral, ang ating pong posisyon dyan, ang Old Aborlan is the ancestral domain of the Tagbanwa's earliest settlements. Makikita po ito sa mga lumang mapa ng Paragua. So, Aborlan po ay makikita na sa 1758 Murillo map, kasama po ang Punta de Asunción o yung Puerto Princesa sa kasalukuyan. Kung titignan po natin, ang kasalukuyang navigational bearing o posisyon ng Puerto Princesa ay 9 degrees and 7 minutes and 9 degrees and 8 minutes. So, 2 hanggang 30 degrees difference compared doon sa unang binigay po o sa mga binigay ng piloto ni Albo at ni Pigafetta. So, maaari po nating masabi na hindi po sila nakarating sa general area po ng Puerto Princesa sa kanilang paglalayag sa Palawan. Ang naabot lamang po nila, yung general area, approximate area po na sa sakop ng Old Aborlan, na ancestral domain po ng mga Tagbanwa. Next slide, please. Okay, so tingnan naman po natin, no, para ma-validate natin. Francisco Albo had the most complete description of this effort. So sila po ay nag-anchor sa Aborlan at nagtangka po silang mag-land. So meron po sila yung malaki nilang barko, tapos bumaba sila sa maliliit nila na barko at mag-a-attempt po sila mag-land. From this Cagayan, ito po yung biyahe pa nila mula sa Mapon, they went on further to west-southwest and fell in with a large island. Ito po yung Palawan ngayon, o yung mainland South Palawan, and ran along the coast of this island to the northeast and reached as far as 9 degrees and a half, where they went ashore one day with the boats equipped to seek for provisions, for in the ships there was not more than ration for 8 days. On reaching the shore, the inhabitants would not suffer them to land and shot at them with arrows of cane hardened in the fire so that they returned to the ships. So technically po, hindi po nakaland. Nakapag-anchor lamang po sila, nakababa sila sa mga barko, mga maliliit nilang boats para po sana mag-first landing. Pero naging abrupt po ito dahil hostile po yung mga inhabitants at sila po ay pinagsisibat ng sibat na gawa po sa yantok, no? So malaki po ang posibilidad na ang mga humarang o naging hostile po sa paglanding nila ay ang mga katutubo po na tinatawag natin na mga Tagbanwa dahil ito po ang kanilang area hanggang sa kasalukuyan po. Ito po yung area po na tinitirahan ng mga settlements po ng mga Tagbanwa. Next slide, please. So the first encounter with local inhabitants were probably with the Tagbanwas of Aborlan. So this is an abrupt event because having prepared and launched the smaller boats to gather supplies, they were attacked by the natives with arrows of cane hardened in the fire and forcibly driven away from the shore. So the excerpt reads, on reaching shore, the inhabitants would not suffer them to land and shot at them with arrows of cane hardened in the fire so that they returned to the ship. So Old Aborlan area was the site of the first anchorage. Hindi po sila nakapag-land dito. Next slide, please. So yan po, again, balikan natin yung lumang mapa ni Murillo. Makikita po natin na napakahaba po ng coastal area na sakop po ng lumang Aborlan. Kasi po ang bayan po ng Nara ay natatag lamang I think around 1960, no? Hinati po, no? Ang isang bahagi ng Aborlan po ay binigay po sa bagong bayan ng munisipyo ng Nara. Next slide please. Okay, so tutungo naman po tayo sa first and second Palawan landfall or landing, no? So their first attempt to land in Aborlan failed, so the crew tried again. Actually, meron pong pagkakataon, makikita po, na nagtangka pa rin po sana silang tumuloy sa norte. Ang naging balakid lamang po sa kanilang paglalayag, panahon na po ng vendavales, sa Castilla, vendavales yung tinatawag nating habagat. So meron po silang tinatawag na paglalayag na against po sa current na dala po ng habagat on the vendavales. So they doubled back and sailed southward instead because of the vendavales. So mahaba po yun, no? Pabalik na sila from the general Aborlan area, then papunta na po sila ng timog o south at naghanap sila ng pinakamaganda o pinakamalapit na anchorage area. Ang pinakamalaki pong posibilidad dito ay ang Bahia de Islas o Bay of Islands or Island Bay. Doon po sa mga lumang sources, no? And may nag-volunteer po sa kanila, ang pangalan niya po ay Joam Campos. He volunteered to come ashore and he was welcomed this time. Nag-volunteer po itong sundalo na to kasi naniniwala siya na hindi naman po siya navigator. Hindi rin po siya marunong magtimon ng barko, no? So naisip niya na wala namang mawawala, so siya na lang po ang mag-volunteer na bumaba. Dahil nga po dun sa first experience nila na negatibo dahil hindi sila pinayagan ng mga katutubo na maglanding. So, mag-isa po ata ito si Joam Campos na bumaba, no? Next slide please. So ito po yung actual na narrative ng Genoese pilot, the first landfall. So he went on ashore and as soon as he reached it, the inhabitants received him and took him into the interior at the distance of a league. And he was in the village in the village, all the people came to see him, and they gave him food and entertained him well. This country is called Jigusam, and it is in 9 degrees. So nakababa po si Campos, winelcome po siya at pinakain, no? Ang area po na ito ay area or ancestral naman po ng mga Palawan. So mula sa Tagbanwa ng Aborlan, dito naman po sila sa area o ancestral domain po ng mga Palawan. Next slide please. So take note po, Tagusao is the most important clue. Campos, si Joam Campos yung sundalo, mentioned Jagusam which refers to the Tagusao area. This supports Albo's narrative reporting his own version of Tagusao, having heard it as Sao-Sao or Sao-Cao. So ito naman po kay Albo. Kung sa Genoese pilot, Jigusam, kay Albo naman po, kay Francisco Albo, Sao-Cao or Sao-Sao. Then he went to north 1/4 degrees, coasting along it until the town of Sao-Cao, and there we made peace. And they were Moors, and we went to another town which is of Cafres. No. Next slide, please. So again, Tagusao is the most important clue. Kung gagamitin natin at face value ang 9 degrees na binigay ng Genoese pilot at i-cross-reference po natin ito, gumamit po tayo ng longitude-latitude finder. Ang babagsakan po natin is yung bayan po ng Sofronio Española today, pero ang tawag po sa kanya ay Pulot, no? Maaari pong ito'y kinuha doon sa Ipolote na lugar din siya o pangalan din po siya ng mga Kastila para sa Pulot na ngayon ay Sofronio Española. Ang Pulot po dati ay nahahati ang Pulot po ngayon nahahati sa tatlong bahagi. Meron tinatawag na Pulot Shore, malapit sa Dalampasigan, Pulot Sentro, kung saan makatatagpuan po yung bayan, at yung tatawag nating Pulot Interior. So, makikita po dito sa table na ginawa natin, yung Jagusam ni Campus ay 9 degrees. Yung Pulot Interior po ay 9 degrees and 4. Ang Pulot Sentro po ay 8.99 at ang Pulot Shore po ay 8.93. So, malaki ang posibilidad na ang unang landing po ay nangyari po sa Pulot Tagusaw area. So, kailangan po natin itong tandaan kasi ma-mention po uli ang Tagusaw sa mga susunod na slide. Next po. So, kung titingnan niyo ang Genoese pilot's account, meron pong 3 variation ng Tagusaw. Digusam, Diguacam, and Diguaquam. No? So, the first landing site was the Ipulote area of Tagusaw. So, they traded in Pulot and were invited to sail or transfer to another site where they anchored in a port. The second landing site po, o yung pangalawang landing site was Port of Tegusaw or Tagusaw na makikita natin sa Pigafetta drone map of Palawan. Next po. Okay, hindi pa po pala yung sa Pigafetta. No? So, Tagusaw as most important clue. Dito po sa ating PowerPoint, sa screen nyo, makikita nyo po, Ipulote dati, ngayon ay Pulot. Tapos, noong 1995, naging bayan na po siya ng Sofronio Española, ipinangalan po sa dating congressman po ng Palawan. So, from Ipulote, naging Pulot, and then naging Sofronio Española today. And then makikita po natin, may Tagusaw din po dito sa mga pangito, no? Na sa tabing dagat din po at tabi ng isang ilog na ang pangalan din po ay Tagusaw. Next slide, please. So, excerpts from the Genoese pilot. Inhabitants of another village a little further on came to the ships and told them to go to their village and that they would give them much provisions for their money. And as soon as the said man whom they have sent, they set sail and went to anchor at the village of those who had come to call them. They set sail from this port of Jigucam on the 21st day of July 3 to seek for Borneo. So nakipag-trade po sila sa Tagusaw Pulot area. Tapos po kumalat sa coastal settlements na merong mga banyagan na nakikipagkalakalan. Meron pong isang grupo na pumunta po doon sa una nilang nilandingan at inimbita sila na lumipat sa kabilang lugar. So sila po naglayag ng di kalayuan at sila po ay dumaong sa isang daungan o port at ito nga po yung tinatawag nating Port of Tagusaw. Next slide please. So dito po sa Pigafetta's map of Palawan, so si Pigafetta pong gumawa nito, makikita nyo po ang Port de Tegusaw, Palawan, meaning Palawan po yung entire na island na malaki, at yung Sundan po, yan po yung old name po ng Borneo. So, Port of Tagusaw, which is Porte de Tagusaw. Ngayon, maaari po nating sabihin, bakit kakaiba po ang korte ng Palawan dito sa ginawa o drawing ni Pigafetta? Yun na rin po ang aming argument na hindi po nila na-drawing ng eksakto o very similar o kahit na kahalintulad ng kasalukuyang hugis ng Palawan kasi hindi po nila talaga nalibot ang malaking isla. So babalikan po natin, nakarating lamang po sila doon sa may Aborlan area. Hindi po nila na-circumnavigate, which is the usual stuff or thing na ginagawa. Iikutin mo po to chart the waters of a province or an island. At saka pag tinignan nyo po ito, kailangan baligtarin pa po siya. So ang Sundan ay dapat nasa ibaba kasi siya po ay Borneo. So lalabas po na itong Port of Tagusaw ay nakaharap po sa Sulu Sea, sa tinatawag nating southeast coastal area. Next slide please. So ayan, ni-reverse na po natin ang Pigafetta map para ma-appreciate po natin. So makikita natin ang Port of Tagusaw, nasa southeast na po siya. And then you have Sundan o Borneo, nasa immediately south na po siya, baba na po siya ng Palawan. o ng isla ng Palawan. So, third and fourth landing na po tayo. Ang second landing po sa Tagusao Pulot, ang first landing po sa Tagusao Pulot, ang second landing po ay sa Port of Tagusao sa Brooks Point, Palawan. Meron po doong lugar ang Brooks na ang tawag ay Barong-Barong o Barangay Barong-Barong, na meron pong sitio ng pangalan po ay Tagusao na nasa tabi po ng Tagusao River. Doon po sa general area po ng Tagusao River at sitio Tagusao na matatagpuan sa Barong-Barong sa Brooks Point, Palawan, ay mayroon pong luma o dating daungan po ng mga maliliit na bangka na naglalayag po sa pagitan ng Palawan at saka ng Cagayan de Tawi-Tawi o Mapon. Sa kasalukuyan po, pag nagkaroon ng census o sa dating census, makikita natin na marami po na mga taga Barong-Barong o even sa general area po ng Brooks Point na mga Mapon po ng mga Muslim. So, third and fourth landing. Pigafetta narrated the events after their journey from Borneo and returning to the Philippines via southernmost end of Palawan. On leaving this island, we returned backwards to look for a convenient place for cooking our ships, which were leaking. And one of them, through the negligence of the pilot, struck on a shoal near an island named Bibalon. But by the help of God, we got her off. So pagpalik po nila sa Borneo, actually, galing sila ng Palawan, pumunta sila ng Borneo, at pagbalik po nila, Palawan pa rin po ang kanilang re-entry point. So, nabahora po sila sa isang shoal. Ito po yung mababaw na bahagi, no, na mayroong mga buhangin. Sila po ay nabahora. They were grounded or foundered near an island named Bibalon. Ang Bibalon po ngayon ay Bibalon po noon, ito po yung pangalan noon ng Balabac, making the general area of Balabac the approximate site for the third landing site. Next, please. Okay, so titignan po natin, no? Ito yung modern map po ng Balabac with Buliluyan, no? So makikita nyo po, meron po yung malaking island ng Balabac. So diyan po nakalagay po, dito sa pinaka-south po, Timog, diyan po matatagpuan ngayon ng bayan ng Balabac o ang kanilang munisipyo. So may nabanggit po doon sa Pigafetta account, sa mga accounts na Simbonbon, no? So maaari po sa sapantahan namin, sa pag-aaral namin, na ito po yung Bugsok Island. Kasi po ang binigay na degrees po ng mga accounts is 8 degrees and 7 minutes, which actually corresponds dun sa area, general area sa pagitan po ng Bugsok at ng Balabac. So makikita nyo po rito ang isla ng Dalahican, Bangkalan, hindi po makita rito dahil masyado ng naka-zoom out ang isla po ng ano nga ba to? Dalahican, Bangkalan, Mantanggule, no? So meron po pito pa na isla yan sa pagitan ng Bugsok at ng Balabac itself na malaki na panay po mga shoals, no? So malamang po isa sa mga isla na to na maraming shoals na bahora o na-grounded ang kanilang mga barko kung saan sila nag-conduct ng repair. So yung Buliluyan po, ito yung pinakadulo na lugar o endpoint, southernmost endpoint ng main island of Palawan. Okay, next slide please. So after fixing their boats in Balabac, they anchored at Buliluyan, which is Batarasa's barangay, southernmost tip of Palawan. The expedition spent the remaining part of their 42 days exploring the place and gathering additional supplies for their Moluccas journey. So Pigafetta narrates, the island in which we were is called Palawan. On leaving this island, that is to say, the port which is at the extremity of it, take note po natin, pag sinabing extremity of it, pinakadulo po, maaari po yung tinatawag natin Cape o Kapo ng Palawan, which corresponds to Buliluyan today. We met a junk which was coming from Borneo. So pag alis po nila ng Buliluyan na pinakadulo ng isla ng Palawan, nakasalubong po nila ang isang grupo po o isa pong bangka na galing naman sa Borneo, no? We made signals to it to strike its sails, but as it would not obey, we overtook it, captured and pillaged it. It had on board the governor of Palawan with a son and a brother of his. So meron na rin po tayong political framework o political structure at that time kasi ang salubong po nila at kanilang ano ba ang tawag dito, kanilang hinuli, dinakip, o kinidnap for ransom ay yung governor of Palawan, kasama po ang kanyang anak at ang kanyang kapatid. Next slide please. So ito po yung pinaka-summary, no? The Palawan anchorage and landing sites of the Magellan-Elcano Expedition. First anchorage po, nangyari sa Old Aborlan area, which includes Nara, Aborlan, and parts of Puerto Princesa today. Pero hindi po sila nakaland dahil sila po ay sinibat, tinaboy sila ng mga katutubo na malamang po mga tagbanwa. So, trinay nilang magpunta ng norte, pero dahil po sa habagat, vendavales, napilitan silang bumalik papuntang timog o southward. Naghanap po sila ng matataguan dahil nga po sa lakas ng current. Ang pinakamalapit po yung Bahia de las Islas na malapit po, actually off lamang po sa harap po ng Pulot. Yung first landing po nila ay sa Pulot, Ipulote dati, Pulot, Tagusao. Ang second landing naman po nila ay Port of Tagusao, which is in Brooks Point. Ito pong dalawang ito ay magkatabi lamang po. Ang Pulot po ay dating parte ng Brooks Point. Ang isa sa mga pinakamatandang bayan po ay Brooks Point. Sakop niya po ang Pulot. No? Masasabi natin na ang Pulot ay anak lamang po ng bayan ng Brooks Point. Ang third landing po nila ay Balabac area. Wala po silang nagawa dito dahil sila ay nabahora, they were grounded. They have to repair their ships there. And then fourth landing po nila ay sa Buliluyan, Bataraso. So you have the Palawan anchorage and landing sites of the Magellan-Elcano voyage. Yan po yung ating narrative. So maraming salamat po sa pagkakataon na to. I hope po marami tayong natutunan at naibahagi ko rin po ito sa mga nanonood ng mga taga-Palawan ngayon, live po sa Facebook. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Professor Michael Angelo Doblado. At talagang napakayaman sa information. No? Well, gusto ko lang banggitin no, na talagang yung iba ngayon ko lang narinig yung mga sinasabi ko. At napakalaki ambag ng inyong research sa pagbuo ng Magellan Voyage dito sa Pilipinas. No? Hindi ko na ipe-preempt ang NQC kung saan yung mga voyage na yun. Pero nakakasiguro ako na ang inyong pagsaliksik ay well taken no? Sa National Historical Commission NQC no? At malaki ang maitutulong niyan sa pag-track no? ng Magellan's Voyage dito sa Pilipinas. No? Kaya well, kita-kita natin no yung interplay ng mga sources kasi ang team po natin ay historiography. So hindi lamang po mga dokumento pinag-uusapan kundi pati mga coordinates no, mga direksyon dahil tinatrack nga po yung voyage ni Magellan. No? Imagine 500 years ago. Kaya ito yung napakagandang kontribusyon no, sa pag-unlad ng historiografiya. Well, para po sa kaalaman ng lahat, pag pinag-usapan natin ay historiografiya, ito po yung pagsulat ng kasaysayan. Kasaysayan ang pagsulat ng kasaysayan. Ano? Kaya ito ang tinatalakay natin. Hindi po ito yung mismong data lamang. No? Kung paano siya sinusulat yung kasaysayan. At ito pong nakaraan nating speaker ay maliwanag na naging matagumpay sa kanyang presentasyon tungkol sa paggamit ng mga sources para maipakita ang daloy ng kasaysayan ng Palawan nung dumating si Magellan doon. At naipakita yung iba't ibang points no, of landing ni Magellan. So, nakakasiguro ako na ito po ay magiging malaking source of history, lalo-lalo na dito sa ating pagtatakda no, ng mga panandang pagkasaysayan sa Pilipinas. No? So hintayin lang po natin ang NQC sa bagay na ito. So medyo kapos po tayo sa oras, dadako po tayo sa susunod natin mga tagapagsalita. No? Mula sa Palawan, tayo pupunta tayo sa Samar, Leyte at mapalad po tayo dahil ang ating mga magiging tagapagsalita, actually mag-ama. No? Hindi ba kayo nagsawa sa history? No? Hindi pwede. No? Kasi talagang ang kasaysayan po ay pag-aaral ng ating identity, no? Local identity, national identity, at it cross-border even generations. No? So, ang una po nating tagapagsalita ay, well-known author po siya. Marami po siyang nasulat na libro, no? Katulad ng latest Summer Shadows, Essays on the History of Eastern Visayas, na Balangica Conflict Revisited. Naging National Book Award din siya sa kanyang libro na The Colonial Odyssey of Leyte. No? At marami po siya mga na-publish ng mga libro ng New Day Publishers. At member po siya ng Editorial Advisory Board ng the Journal of History. Very known po ito. No? Published by the Philippine National Historical Society. At served as Visayan representative ng National Committee on Historical Research sa NCCA mula 2014 to 2016 at 2017 to 2019. Talagang veterano. At sa ngayon po, siya po ay full professor sa School of Health Sciences, University of the Philippines, Manila in Palo, Leyte. So hindi ko na po pagtatagalin. Ang ating po tinutukoy ay ang historian po ng Summer Leyte na si Dr. Rolando Borrinaga. Sir, good morning po.
Magandang umaga, Mane, at saka thank you. I will share my slides from my end. Okay, so narinig niyo ba ako? Can you hear me?
Okay po, maliwanag sir.
Okay.
Maliwanag po.
So this is our presentation, the title, and we attempt here to complement the narratives of Antonio Pigafetta about the islands of Leyte and Samar, which constitute now Eastern Visayas, and our alternative sources beyond the Pigafetta account are derived from ethnography, linguistics, geography, and archaeology. Of course, the key people here are Magellan and Pigafetta. Now, in this slide, I show the Ladrones to Samar route sailed by the Magellan expedition based on Albo's log. He provided actually latitudes for each day of travel, and I plotted this on a Google Earth map. So that's the road they passed. Now, at dawn of 16 March 1521, they sighted highland, quote unquote, and eventually reached Samar, island of Samar, in the afternoon of that day. Although Pigafetta implied that the highland they saw belonged to Samar, a 20th century historian, Father Martin Noon, suggested that the highland they first saw over the horizon were actually mountains of Leyte, some peaks of which rose to 3,000 or 4,000 feet. They would have seen the outlines of the lower elevated Samar only later in the day. Now, in this photo here, there is the Castallanes volcano, which is the highest mountain in south of Leyte, which is actually along the path, along 10 degrees latitude that was recorded by Albo. And the first island was called by Albo as Yunuguan, which is actually on the present Hinunangan, and I think the original word is Hunungan, which is a place for stopover perhaps by traders, Asian traders, Chinese or Moluccan traders before the arrival of the Spanish expedition. Now, Albo noted that after sighting land on 16 March 1521, the expedition sailed towards the northwest. And when they saw the land, it was called Samal by Pigafetta and still Yunuguan to Albo, that it trended north and there were many shoals near it. They took another tack to the south and came upon another small island, Suluan, and they anchored there for the night of the same day, March 16, 1521. Now, this slide shows the island of Suluan, in southern Samar. Actually, they docked somewhere to the left of the photo, and the boat that they saw the next day actually rounded off that portion on the north. So an incident attendant to the Suluan Anchorage landing was not mentioned by Pigafetta, but was described in two other eyewitness accounts. Albo said that they saw some canoes with riders. Two paraos, wrote the Genoese pilot, which fled when the crew members tried to approach them. So from Suluan, they proceeded to Humonhon. So Pigafetta wrote that the following day, Magellan desired to land on another island which was uninhabited and lay to the right in order to be more secure and to get water and have some rest. He had two tents set up on the shore for the sick and a sow killed for them. The island they landed in was called Humonhon at present. Of course, this is the map of Humonhon and Suluan in the 1889 version produced by Father Alge of Ateneo. And this is actually the original, I think this was the original islands of Archipelago of Saint Lazaro that's mentioned in our textbooks. It was named on his feast day, 17 March, the landing at Humonhon. It must be emphasized because it is confused that March 16 was the feast of San Lazaro. It's not. It is March 17, and that was the date they landed in Humonhon, the Magellan Expedition. Although the island they landed was called Humuno, they also called it Aquada de la Boni Señale, the watering place of good science, because of two springs there of the clearest water, as well as the first signs of gold that is found in that geography. These two springs are still there now in Humonhon. In the map that Pigafetta drew of the area, only Humuno had two labels. The gold items they saw perhaps worn by the natives they met. In the afternoon of Monday, 18 March 1521, the expedition members saw a boat coming towards them with 9 men in it. So once these men had landed on the beach, the leader went immediately to the Captain General and showed signs of joy of the foreigners' arrival. 5 of the most elaborately tattooed among them remained on shore, while the rest went to fetch others who were still fishing until they all came. When Magellan saw that the natives were reasonable men, he ordered food to be set before them and gave them red caps, mirrors, combs, bells, ivory bocas, and other things. In return for the captain's courtesy, the natives presented a fish, a jar of palm wine, which they called raka, figs, more than 1 palm mulong, bananas, and others which were similar and delicate, and 2 coconuts. Now, the natives became very familiar with the members of the expedition and later took great pleasure with them because they were pleasant and conversable. The language translations were apparently provided by Enrique de Malaca. The natives told the foreigners many things, including their names and identities of some islands that could be seen from that place. They said that their island was called Suluan and that it was not very large. Now, the next slide shows a photo of coconut trees. Now, in nearly 1/3 of his Humuno narrative, Pigafetta described the coconut, the fruits, and the tree. It said just as we had bread, wine, oil, and milk, so that those people got everything from that tree. He wrote about the multi-use plant. Now, Pigafetta's lengthy coconut narrative and mention that the natives were reasonable men suggest a display of local hospitality that preceded the Spanish offer of food and gifts. There is still a word in Bisaya, panglamao. It's basically picnic in the groves to pick young coconuts, to drink its water, and to eat its soft meat. This must have been ordered by the foremost chief, his followers, soon after the pleasantries were exchanged with Magellan. Panglamao is still being practiced in many remote rural areas when visitors come around, especially in Leyte and Samar. When the visitors come to your place, almost automatic, manglamao muna tayo. After the native chiefs departed and promised to return in 4 days, they must have left behind at least 3 people, perhaps 2 slaves and a supervising timawa, to look after the needs of their Spanish visitors. These natives not mentioned by Pigafetta must have been respondents and demonstrators in showing him everything about the coconut and its uses. The same natives must have served as climbers of the tall trees to buy wine and to pick the exact young coconut fruits, which Walter Magellan gave from his own hand every morning to the recuperating sick members of his crew. Now, a place that Pigafetta never bothered to explain was Humuno, written as Humunhon by the next generation of Spaniards. An Italian or Spaniard reading these 2 names would skip the letter H, and thus they would sign as Umuno or Umunon. What does the word with the sound mean in the Visayan language? Now, Umo is an abandoned beehive. The island's name has not been adequately explained in the literature, but its root word is Umo, now forgotten Visayan word for honeyless hive or the abandoned hive of the honeybee. In ancient times, Umo was a good fuel for torches and was also used for making candles. During the Spanish regime, Umo would be processed into beeswax, and this product would be used to pay one's tribute to the government instead of cash or some other product. Of course, you have here a photo of honeybees in their hive, cultured bees. The name that is properly pronounced as Umunon means that the island abounded in Umo honeycombs. Although Pigafetta did not write this in his chronicle, we can presume that Magellan's men, guided by the Suluan natives who attended to their needs, also went around the island to gather Umo from the forests, which they dried and used as fuel for their torches. It is possible that they experienced lighted nights in their galleons here in Humunhon for the first time after more than 3 months of dark nights while sailing across the Pacific Ocean. In many instances, the beehives in the wild are still full of bees and not yet abandoned. Thus, the gatherers would have to build a fire to smoke the bees out of their hives. In the process, they would gather both the beehive and the honey contained in it. Honey gathered from the forest must have also been consumed by the sick men of the Magellan expedition. It is rich in vitamin C, which at the time was not yet known as a cure for scurvy, but it is now. It would seem that honey, more than coconut water, helped in the recovery of the sick from their scurvy. On Friday noon, 22 March 1521, the natives came back as they had promised. They came in 2 boats with coconuts, with oranges, a jar of palm wine, and a cup, as if to show that there were fowls in the geography. They showed signs of great pleasure in seeing the members of the expedition who purchased all the items they bought. The senior among the natives was an old man who was tattooed. He wore 2 gold earrings in the ears, and the others had many gold armlets in their arms and kerchiefs around their heads. On the afternoon of Holy Monday, 25 March 1521, the expedition returned to their ships, and they were supposed to be at the point of weighing anchor. Pigafetta fell to the sea and almost drowned until he was rescued. The same day, the Magellan expedition ended its Humunhon episode and shaped its course towards the west. Between 4 islands of Sinalo, Hiunangan, now mentioned by by Pigafetta in his narrative Ibuson and Abarien. Okay, that slide shows the names of the islands that formed the archipelago de San Lazaro. Suluan Sinalo is perhaps mishearing of Dinagat. Ibuson is the name. Yunangan is Sinunangan. Humuno, Humunhon. Abarien, most likely Kabalian, or for Samal is Samar. Now, the Pigafetta account provides the basic historical record of the arrival of the Magellan expedition on our islands in 1521. This was virtually the only source of detailed published evidence, but in Homonhon, archaeological evidence that provides there are also archaeological evidence that provide independent proofs that Magellan and his men had really been here. This came in the form of names on carved rocks. The foremost evidence was the inscription Fernso Magalhaes carved on the surface of a rock beside a stream in the Cantilado area of Homonhon. Must have been one of those springs that Pigafetta described. Except for the S in the first word, the text approximates the name of Magellan in Portuguese, Fernão Magalhães. The inscribed rock was first discovered in 1932 by a woodcutter in Homonhon. And this was the picture of what I called Magellan's Rock. Actually, the picture was published around 1932 in the Free Press after not 1951 as in the photo. This was published in 1932 when it was reported in the Free Press, right after the discovery of Magellan's Rock. 1952, the Philippine Historical Committee installed a marker just above that rock with the Fernso Magalhaes inscription. Now, the Magellan's Rock with marker, and this was the last known photo of the rock with the marker above that and some excursionists, and then afterwards the rock and the marker disappeared. And so when a Portuguese researcher went there in the 1990s, hindi na niya makita yung rock with the inscription and the marker. In 2000, I published an article, Whatever Happened to Magellan's Rock, and nobody could give me information since then. Until around 2016, when Mr. Alced from NHCP asked if I could help to facilitate so that a replacement marker could be installed in Homonhon. So I tapped a former student of mine to help me out, and this was supposed to be already in process, but hindi pa na-schedule kung kailan ma-install yung marker doon sa Homonhon. But I did some other investigation to that. So my former student, I asked my former student, puntahan why don't you go to the place and help me try to find if the Magellan's Rock is still there. So she went and I talked to some teachers and sinamahan siya doon. But hindi nila makita on the first visit. And instead, they found, I was sent a photograph which I had since called the Magellan Sans Rock. So this is what I call the Magellan Sans Rock. This was actually already identified in 1952 when the summer governor, in the course of putting up a marker, there was already a marker which they thought was a date. But I realized that it's not a date or Marso 3 or something like that. It was something else. It seems to be the abbreviation of the family name and an inverted letter C of Magellan's actually illegitimate son, Cristobal Rabelon. As for the MA, it could have been the abbreviation of the name of another sailor. But anyway, Rabo approximates the Ravelo name. So anyway, during a second visit, nahanap na rin yung original Magellan's rock. Pinahukay na aking former student, nakita na rin very vandalized form. Nakita rin at saka the original medyo that's now the what's left of the Fernso Magalhaes inscription. And unfortunately, it's been covered with soil again after a few weeks after this photograph. Okay, so from Humonhon, they went to Masawa. Now we have here the map of Limasawa in the Murillo Velarde first map. Now I have since conducted research, investigation, and I have concluded that Limasawa was actually Masawa. The name of Limasawa was Masawa until 1602. And I presented this already. I had presented this to the Mujeres panel last year, and including the list of the sources and it's called the island Masawa. Now, the one of those the artifact is what I call the Limasawa pot. It shows the side where written in Baybayin there is the Raka Masawa Ha inscription. Now, in the 1660s, the phonetic Masawa in the island's name would be added to the different prefixes by 3 Jesuits. The Masawa by Father Culin, Limasawa by Father Combes, and Imasawa by Father Alcina. But it was Father Combes' label that had been retained to this day. Okay, so one of the sources there is Hines de Mafra, who was with the expedition of both Magellan and Villalobos expedition, and he said that the harbor in Masawa was on the western side. And then during the Legazpi expedition, they have this one paragraph narrative about Masawa, and I converted that one paragraph narrative into the movement of the single person that they had met on the western part of Masawa. The person was on a rock. He climbed down, went up the hill, burned a hut there, and then returned to his place and up in the rock and cut the stairs. Now, Father Scrurs, years ago when I corresponded with him, would have agreed that the cross that was planted on Masawa was by the Magellan expedition was here on that circled thing on the top of the hill. And this has been my study that was presented to the Mujeres panel. There is the western harbor on the west part of Limasawa, and then at the top, the peak of the hill where the cross was presumably planted, and on the rectangular portion there at the bottom is the approximate site where the first Easter Sunday Mass could have been held. It's now occupied by the Catholic Church of Masawa. Okay, so I think it's now George's turn to present. Thank you.
So,
Judge.
maraming salamat po sa Sir Rolly, Rolando Borrinaga. It's a napakagandang presentation and it will be followed by Dr. George Emmanuel Borrinaga. Well, just to formally introduce Sir George, siya po ay for his dissertation on local history of community resilience in Samar and Leyte from the start of Spanish colonization up to the present period, 2013, yung Yolanda, the aftermath of Yolanda. He currently serves as Visayas representative in the National Committee on Historical Research, the NCCA, at ngayon po siya po ay secretary ng NCHR, na Executive Council. So kung di po nakakamali, si Sir George po ay awarded din ito ng Young Historians Prize. So hindi ko na po pagtatagalin to complement the lecture of his father, the presentation of his father. May I give you now Dr. George Emmanuel Borrinaga. Sir, please. Thank you.
Thank you po, Sir Manny, for the introduction, and thank you then to the organizers for inviting us to present this morning. So my part of the presentation continues where my father, my kuya, left off, but in this case, I want to focus on some of the points raised earlier. So for instance, the hospitality aspect of the Homonhon episode and other aspects of the Samar-Leyte leg of the Magellan expedition, which could perhaps be better contextualized. We would get a better understanding of local perspectives by looking at alternative sources. So in the next slides, I will show some of these possible sources and some quotes from them and provide my analysis. So some of them still a bit speculative, but hopefully we can get a better appreciation of the area. So particularly the Homonhon and Limasawa or Masawa episodes of the expedition. So the question I'd like to raise for this part of the presentation is how did the local population perceive and receive the arrival of the Magellan expedition in Samar and Leyte? So basically yung punto de vista ng mga locals ang perhaps better understood through these alternative sources. So as already seen in the previous presentations, the available primary sources include mainly Pigafetta as along with other complementary sources which would enhance the narrative. But basically it has been Pigafetta's account that has been the final authority. That was the term used by James Robertson, who provided an English translation of Pigafetta. But the issue with these sources is that their perspective is limited. So they're limited to the European perspective, and people like William Henry Scott had suggested that we use a cracks in the parchment curtain approach to glean how the natives themselves viewed the events that are being described in the Pigafetta account. So these are some of the sources I will be using. So for local perspective, we could go to oral tradition, because as we'll see, there were actually at least one account which provides details on how the Magellan expedition might have been remembered in subsequent decades. So this was from 1668, and almost a century had passed. But apparently in the Homonhon area, the passage of the Magellan expedition was still vividly remembered. And Other sources include Luarca's account. So this is from 1582. And the others are an analysis of the geography as well as some of the archaeological finds, which would help us get a bigger or wider picture of the summer Leyte episodes of the expedition. So the approach is therefore ethnographic. It also looks at the environment and also in terms of the focus, we look at the episodes in Homonhon and Limasawa. As already explained earlier, it was a very friendly encounter, especially the first encounters which they had in Homonhon, which is interesting in light of what other sources tell us about this island. Because according to Father Alsina, who is the main source for this presentation, aside from the name Omonhon, the island was known by other names. So the label discussed earlier was Watering Place of Good Signs, which is what can be seen in some of the maps of Homonhon in the early years of Spanish rule. But also, Alsina mentioned that it was also known as Isla de Encantada. So this is apparently the first instance of parang may kababalaghan na recorded in history, because according to him, some Spaniards would say when they were approaching Homonhon, they would see a village and then they would see people. But when they approached the island, the visions they had would no longer be there. So there was something strange going on, and this was something recorded by Alsina in his chronicle. And he also added that before the coming of the Spaniards, Homonhon was actually a very well-known island. It was in fact a pilgrimage site. And water had also a role in that, because people went there to get water. But it was not ordinary water, but it was considered as what we could call holy water, because it was provided by the god who inhabited the island, who was, according to Alsina, the name was Makapatag. And if you look at the quotes I provide, Makapatag was a sort of equivalent to European gods like Jupiter or Zeus or Thor. So he was a god of similar to the god of thunder or god of the sky. But other accounts, including that of Luarca, would suggest that he was also one of the three war gods. So two of whom were women, and a third who was termed Makaandok. So this is an interesting name, because in subsequent oral tradition, the god inhabiting Homonhon was no longer known as Makapatag but as Makaandog. So this was the 20th century variant of that oral narrative. So what's significant about the Homonhon episode is that it turned out to be a very important pilgrimage site, and in fact people were afraid to visit that site because if you did not properly ask permission from the god, the war god, the Diwata who inhabited the island, you could be punished. So that's interesting to read Pigafetta, that the natives came over to Homonhon when the Magellan expedition was there, and there were friendly interactions between the Spaniards and the natives. So later I'll suggest possible reasons why this was the case. And the other evidence I present is a quote from 2013, which would support the possibility that Makapatag, who was known as the Great Equalizer, might have been a sort of typhoon god or also a war god. So this is not only unique to Samar, but even in Leyte, there are also oral narratives about a giant who lived underneath the ground who caused earthquakes when he was disturbed. So again, these diwatas, it's possible that they were usually associated with natural hazards. So makaandog or makapatag with typhoons, Enoch or Tigalhong as causes for earthquakes in Leyte, and the fertility goddess known as Malaon, who was believed to inhabit Canlaon volcano in Negros. So we can see that all these natural hazards like volcanoes, typhoons, earthquakes, they might have been associated with certain diwatas. And we can see that these are not just part of folklore, but based on these accounts, we can see that they were seen as part of the history of the locals or the islanders. And they were also considered as a sorts of ancestors. So in 20th century narratives, even Yolanda survivors in Suluan Island, they would say that they were strong, they survived Typhoon Yolanda because they were descendants of Makaandog, who was known as a tall and very strong giant. So we can see how oral tradition and folklore becomes part of history. So these are some of the additional evidence which would show that this is still a very strong tradition. So even on Facebook, we can see the local government of Eastern Samar promotes this narrative. So physical features in the environment usually has a story associated with these ancestral giants. So not only footprints, but even islands. So islands which are supposed to have been where Makaandog dried his net. So similar stories. And in terms of meteorological phenomenon, natural hazards, we can see from the list on the left that a lot of environmental features, even the sun, the moon in the 20th century, there were accounts linking them to this ancestral giant. So the next question would be, if Makaandog was based on Homonhon, and if according to Alcina, there were a lot of these stories about ancestral giants in Samar, then where was the Leyte counterpart based? Because Alcina mentioned that it was not only in Samar where he heard these stories or songs about a giant or giants, but even also in Leyte, although he forgot the name. So I would suggest that Limasawa might have been the place. If we are to look at an old name for the northern half of or northern side of Limasawa Island, which is called Tawid. So if you look at the old meaning as indicated in the Sanchez Dictionary of 1711, Tawid is a sort of crossing. You cross the sea or you cross the deep sea in order to reach an island, or in this case, as seen in the example given, to fetch water. So again, comparing this to Homonhon, which was a pilgrimage site where you could find holy water, apparently a similar practice operated in Limasawa. People crossed over not only to ask for things like firewood or water or holy water, but other necessities. And in this case, this practice of Tawid, crossing over to get necessities, including water, did not only apply to humans, but even the gods, the diwatas, which people believe to be part of their daily lives. So we can see in the arrows I provide in this map that these giants were believed to cross over between places like Samar and Leyte, or Pumonhon to Mindanao. Or in this case, according to Father Alcina, the giant he mentioned, who he did not name, was known to cross between Limasawa, Panaon Island, and Caraga. So I'm not sure if you can see the quotes in the slide, but these are some of the accounts, not only from Alcina but also from the Hart couple, Don Hart and Harriet Hart, who studied this Pakaandog story. So if you can provide a comparison with Luzon, he was a sort of Bernardo Carpio, so this giant who was believed to be part of the daily lives of people. So according to this pattern, so it's possible that Limasawa was the abode of this other Leyte giant who Alcina mentions but does not name. So the other thing or local knowledge I'd like to discuss is the memories of ship landings and sightings, which I hinted at earlier. So this is what Alcina said about a tradition he encountered when he was assigned, because he was a Jesuit priest assigned in many towns in Leyte and Samar. When he was assigned to the Giwan area, he found that there was a well-founded tradition saying that the Spanish ships had arrived in this island in the beginning. But he cast doubt on this story because the official account they had at the time was that Magellan did not pass through this area, or at least that was the view of Alcina, that this was not part of the route of the Magellan expedition. So he tried to dismiss this narrative. But what's interesting about this is the sort of pride displayed by the people in narrating these stories. So he even provides a rebuttal and saying that this might have been mere stories because the natives did not have a good time reckoning. They did not really remember the year when certain events happened. But I would argue that in Filipino history, we do not, or at least people at this time did not really reckon time in terms of years, but they were based on cycles because they were agriculturists, or they depended on natural cycles in understanding history. So we could compare this to what happened to Captain Cook, where his arrival in Hawaii was seen as part of local notions of history. So in that case, Captain Cook was killed in Hawaii because he was mistaken as the god Lono. So a similar pattern might have happened in Homonon, but interestingly, it was hospitality and not like the Hawaii case where they killed Captain Cook. So this is the possible significance of this event, that it might have been seen as a very significant event in the prophetic tradition of the natives at the time. So I would suggest that the arrival of the Magellan expedition was a return of sorts. So they were not new people, but according to the oral tradition, and this is found in Luarca's account, that in the origin myths of the Pingianes, and I think he refers to the mountain groups in Panay who he associated with. So he mentioned an origin myth and the accounts of the folks he interviewed, that in the early times, the human race was divided into several groups because they had split up after their primordial father had scolded them. So some hid in the master's bedroom, they became didatus. Some went to the sala and they became the timawa. Others went to the kitchen, they hid in the walls and they became the slaves, while others went to the kitchen and hid in the pots and jars, and because of cooking, so they turned black, and that was their explanation for why there were Negrito groups in the Philippines. But here is where the Spanish origins comes in, because according to the subsequent tradition, at least after the Spaniards arrived, as recorded by Luarca, they saw the Spaniards as their long-lost brethren. So those who went out of the house and went out to sea to escape the wrath of their father. And now they were returning. So this might be the possible explanation why in Humonhon, the people of Suluan were very welcoming, and why later they were proud of this fact that the Magellan expedition had passed this way, because they were going back to this sacred island. So possibly an island that was not only the abode of Makapatag, but also a sort of village of the dead. So ang pinaka-heaven nila, because at that time, heaven was not considered as somewhere in the sky, but usually it was on another island. So the Cebuanos had, and the Boholanos had Borneo as a heaven, a mountain in Borneo. Those in Panay had Mount Madyaas as their sulad or saad. And possibly in the Samar Leyte region, that was the abode of Makapatag, which was Homonhon. And that's why it was called Isla de Encantada, because of this supernatural phenomenon which the Spaniards reported on, and which also adheres to the cultural pattern where these gods had a village for their descendants, because as I mentioned, Makapatag or Makaandog were seen or possibly seen as ancestors for these people. And again, they were related to or linked to the natural hazards in the area, typhoon. We need to look at alternative sources, and preferably ethnographic sources, in order to better understand the local perceptions of how the Spanish arrival was perceived. And the sources I suggest are only a few of the possible materials that could be explored. So in other languages throughout the country, the early Spanish encomenderos or the missionaries made dictionaries like the Sanchez dictionary I utilized, or my father utilized earlier. And other regions could use a similar approach in trying to uncover the local perceptions of the Magellan expedition. So again, the focus on local cultures, traditions, and languages, the comparisons between past and present, so some practices which might have had pre-colonial origins, and also the focus on local knowledge in appreciating the encounters between East and West in the early Spanish period. So thank you, Mupay. Ilamong salamat yan, Mupay adlaw yung tanan.
So, maraming salamat, Dr. George. No? At malaking bagay, no? Yung natalakay ng Dr. Rolly at Dr. George tungkol dun sa mga alternative sources. Kasi kanina pinag-uusapan na natin mga archival documents. Katulad ng kay Pigafetta. But in our final speakers, no, nakita natin na mayroong mga corroborative evidences. At usually ganyan po ang mga ginagawa sa historiography. Aside from writings, tinitingnan din yung katulad ng ginawa nila, no? Linguistics, ethnography, environment, geography, archaeology. Actually, parang hindi ka makapaniwala na meron palang 500 years na rock, no? Magellan's rock. No? Kaya yun, maraming paraan para i-corroborate ang historical narratives. At pag lumusot ka dyan, no, siguro talagang very authentic na yung narrative na naisulat natin. Well, ang mga binabanggit po nila Sir George, Sir Rolly, at ni Sir Mike kanina, ay eventually ay magiging bahagi ng ano po yan, ng nabanggit kanina, yung Mujeres panel. It was convened by the NHCP. Hindi ko na masyadong tatalakayin yun, baka ma-preempt. There will be an official communication from NHCP about the Mujeres panel. But as of this webinar, pinag-uusapan natin yung mga individual researches that will contribute to the researches pertaining to the Magellan's voyage. So time check po tayo ay 12:11 na. Alibag-basta po tayo sa oras natin. Pero meron po tayong mga ilang katanungan. No? I would like to invite our speakers to check yung Q&A box. No? Meron po dito si Miss Emelita Samala. Sabi niya, saan po kaya particular na nakuha ang mga cultural discussions na itala tungkol sa Palawan? Sir Mike, nandiyan pa po ba kayo? Sir Mike?
Good morning, Sir Manny.
Kindly check your Q&A box. Then the questions of Emelita Samala. Miss Emelita Samala.
May audio po ba tayo?
Direct po.
Okay. Doon po sa question ni Ma'am Samala, with regards sa cultural discussion po, pwede niyo pong i-refer dun sa Pigafetta accounts kasi mas clear yung pagkaka-describe niya sa naging reception at saka relationship, no? Unang-una nakipagkalakalan sila 2 beses sa Pulot, and then pangalawa doon sa Port of Tagusaw. Na-describe nila yung mga tao, and then doon din makikita yung I think information or data regarding sa pagsasandugo o yung pakikipag-peace treaty ni Carl Bajo sa local chieftain. At doon din makikita yung description niya ng unang sabong. So you can actually use yung libro ni Henry Edward John Stanley, First Voyage Around the World by Magellan. Tapos pwede mo ring i-check yung gawa ni James Alexander Robertson, Magellan's Voyage Around the World. So yun po yung sagot.
Maraming salamat, Sir Mike. Then we still have 3 questions here, no? Sir Rolly, siguro pwede niyong sagutin itong kay Richmond Lim, kay Philip Palyarin, no? Co-faculty namin sa Lasal, no? Okay. Yes.
Is this about the Magellan's Rock, na? Hello.
Yes, sir. Maliwanag po, maliwanag.
Okay. Actually, yung Magellan's Rock is still on the same place where it was found. Medyo it has been mechanically cut in some places. Apparently, there was an effort apparently to take this away. Pero malalaking rock kasi yon. It's a very big rock. At saka yung mga marami ng later vandals na printed their own names on that rock. So, but anyway, nandyan pa yon because I have the old pictures. So, na-identify ko pa yung original inscription at saka yung the look of the rock. And then the new discovery na yung akala nila na date, yun pala parang inukit ng anak ni Magellan.
Sir, yung po bang rock ay accessible pa ngayon?
Nandyan pa yon. Nandyan pa yon.
So siguro malalaman natin yan sa further yung mapping ng Magellan's Voyage. Importante yun yung sir, tingin ko yung sa tanong ni Richmond Lim, pakibasa, it's about during that time, wala pa tayong aglipayan, syempre, Roman Catholic. So baka ang tinutukoy dito, baka naglagay din ng marker. No, I haven't been in that place. No? So, but definitely, Roman Catholic muna siguro yun. No? Tinutukoy dyan. Then, kay William Torres, wala po bang representative ng National Commission on Indigenous Peoples? Kanina po tinatalakay ni Sir George yung ethnography, no? Yung other alternative sources. Sir George, meron ba kayo masasabi dun sa tanong ni Mr. William Torres?
Ano po yung tanong, sir?
Na-consult ba ang NCIP? Sa akin palagay naman na kasi interagency ang NQC. Pero in your end, ano po ba yung mga local source material? Siguro ba maganda ma-reiterate din para malaman nila aside from dun sa collaboration sa NCIP?
Yung sa amin, sir, is mainly the Alsina manuscripts. It's focused more on the Samar Leyte region and was finalized in 1668. But this was a time when Samar Leyte was being Christianized, so early Christian years of the people in the area, but they still had beliefs about the Diwatas, so it's possible that these beliefs were transformed. So hindi na sila Diwata, but they became these ancestral giants. So they were no longer referred to as Diwata, and they already identified as Christians. And a lot of the events in the early Spanish period were even described as caused by these Diwata, na parang nagagalit yung mga Diwata dahil itinakwil sila, nag-convert na to Christianity. So for instance, the smallpox epidemic of the late 1500s was explained as the god Makapatag poisoning the atmosphere. So as ang na-mention kanina, si Makapatag, the war god, or the god based in Humunon. So that was to express his anger because the Visayans had converted to Christianity or followed the Jesuits. So this is the main source for a lot of these ethnographic materials.
Okay, sir. So thank you very much. Well, aside from the sa Q&A po, meron din sa chat room, no? Si Ms. Divina Diaz, sabi niya, aside from the name Mazawa, do you have any idea about the name Limasagwa related to Limasawa? Limasagwa.
Okay. Actually, the problem with Spanish transcription of the name is wala silang letter W. So it is a GUA or some others. But anyway, it was always pronounced as Masawa.
So
and,
parang lang.
And then the prefix, I don't know, kasi tatlong Jesuits, tatlong prefix. Di, li, at saka i, hi. But it was, I don't know how the name evolved, but it was at least in Limasawa Pat, the name was actually just Masawa. And it was Masawa in Pigafetta, and Masagwa in Henes de Mafra. But it's still the same. The pronunciation is the same, Masawa. At least until 1602, the name was Masawa.
Okay. So, okay po. So, I think that's it. Maraming po salamat sa ating mga panelists. Mula kay Dr. Dizon sa Castallanes de Cavite, kay Sir Doblado para sa Palawan, at kay Dr. Rolly and Dr. George para sa Leyte Alternative Studies. No? Maraming salamat po sa inyo. At well, tungkol po sa certificate, meron po tayong e-certificate. Ipapadala na lamang sa ating mga speakers yung e-certificate of appreciation. At para naman dun sa ating mga participants, e-certificate na papadala through email. No? At medyo tanghali na po. I-close na po natin ang ating webinar. Una-una ay nagpapasalamat tayo sa National Historical Commission of the Philippines, sa technical team, no? Kay Mr. Jervil Cruz at Alec Gerardila, no? Sila yung mga humahawak ng ating mga sa Zoom, no? Nagpapasalamat tayo of course, sa chairman, no? Kay Dr. Escalante at kay Ian, sa senior researcher ng NHCP, at sa lahat ng pamunuan ng Historical Commission. Well, sa Lasal Dasma po, sa Cavite Studies Center, malaking tulong ang staff dito, si Ms. Maylin Dilatado at si Ms. Nery Villanueva, kasama si Dr. Paul Buia at si Shane, no? Lieno. At salamat din po sa mga collaborators ng webinar na ito, katulad ng NCCA, Kabansa, PHA, ang Center for Tarlaqueño Studies, Palawan Studies Center, Bacoor Historical Society, at Cavite Historical Society. Kasama po natin si Prime Minister, nanonood din po kayo. Kasama po sa Zoom, no? At bago po natin tapusin, nais ko lamang bigyang pansin na ito pong webinar po natin ay monthly. No? So ito pong ginawa natin ngayon ay first part ng Philippine Historiography Part 1 dahil meron po tayong Part 2. Ito po ay sa August 19 in observance of History Month, no? National Observance of History Month. At makakasama po natin sa susunod na webinar si Dr. Neil Santillan, ang chair ng Departamento ng Kasaysayan ng UP, no? At vice head ng National Committee on Historical Research ng NCCA. Then makakasama din natin sa susunod na webinar si Dr. Fernando Santiago. Siya po ang director ng SEARCH o yung Southeast Asian Research and Hub ng De La Salle, Manila. At ibabahagi sa atin ang tungkol sa oral history, no? Methodology of oral history. And finally, again, we will invite si Sir Ian Alfonso dahil meron siyang book about the nameless hero. So maganda maipaliwanag din niya yun. No? So, ang tabayanan po natin ang ating mga webinars, no? sa mga darating na buwan. At muli po, maraming salamat po sa mga nag-participate sa webinar na ito. At may mga nagtatanong, may upload po ba ang PowerPoint? Well, yeah, titingnan po natin yung ating copyright kung pwede i-upload ang PowerPoint ng ating mga speakers. Pero definitely po, ito pong ating webinar ay naka-post sa FB page ng NHCP. So pwede po i-view. So yung mga hindi nakapanood ngayon, nakasama sa Zoom, pwede po nilang panoorin sa FB page ng NHCP, NQC, LHCN at sa CSC. So muli po, maraming salamat po sa lahat at pagkita-kita po tayong muli sa susunod na webinar ngayong August. Maraming salamat.
Mandirigmang Pilipino, dakilang lahi ko, bayaning Pilipino sa makabagong panahon.
Sir Manny,
Yes, sir.
pwedeng